Hey guys, I don't know why my video isn't working. So I am just going to share my screen. Of course, everything worked just fine when I tested multiple times today. You don't need to see my face anyway. Okay, can someone just let me know in the chat? Oh, I see it up. Can you guys hear me? As soon as I get a confirmation, I will kick this into the far left lane. Okay. All right. So can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay. Awesome. All right. So tonight, let me throw this into full screen mode. So tonight we are going to take yet another deep dive into my brother, Joe Ryan. You might be thinking, why? We already talked about him. In fact, if you want to check out that live I did, I created this playlist. You can go to bit.ly/LV hyphen case to access all of the videos about this case. And my brother's is in there. Let's talk Joseph Ryan. So why am I doing another one? Well, I guess it was about almost 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine, and this was just an industry friend. I don't think he was like following the case very closely, if at all, but he lobbed this over the fence at me. And he came across this article, and it was all about how this woman is helping to get justice for her sister who had been murdered 20 years prior. And someone had told her, hey, you should start the social media account. And so she started a TikTok account. I am not starting a TikTok account. At least I don't have any immediate plans to do that. But it just kind of got the gerbils running in their cage again. Like, have I done everything? And ironically, I don't even know if my friend knew this at the time, but this was actually Phoenix police. So this case had gone cold. She had already put her stepdad, in the line of fire. Like he is the suspect, and he was arrested not too long ago. But it just kind of put a fire under me, to just, I don't know. I think just processing it, I just pulled up the crime scene. Not crime scene, I'm sorry. They're the pictures from my brother's welfare check. And I pulled those up again, and I went right to one picture in particular. And for whatever reason, I think because there was a lot going on in that particular picture, I decided to just go inch by inch. I started in the upper left-hand corner and literally scanned the picture inch by inch just to see, like, is there anything that I've missed? Because his office has actually been a source of internal contention for me. And I discovered something that I had never noticed before. And so I really started thinking about it. But the reason I had these crime scene photos, well, that's me thinking for days. The reason I had these is that one of my favorite reporters, and there are so many wonderful, wonderful reporters following this case. Garna has been just I don't even know, a cut above in terms of doing things that are so unbelievably kind as a family member. And most people would never know about it. Like very early on, she reached out to me because I said something in a Facebook group that made her think that maybe I didn't know that Tylee had never made an outcry against Joe. And I didn't. I had assumed that she had all this time. And so she let me know that she didn't, and sent me some a few pages from court files, and I just like really clung to those. And at different times she's reached out and has like shared resources and stuff. So one of the things that she did was she had ordered the photos from the welfare check after Joe's body was discovered. It was more than 100 photos. And she reached out to see if I wanted any. And she wanted to like hold back some of the kind of more graphic photos. I mean, they were still obfuscated by police, but there was still a lot you could see. And I was just like, no, because there were questions that I had about things that Lori said that I would only know if I, kind of saw everything. And so, but it was under the condition that I kept them to myself, which I was eager to do. But as I, kind of wrestled, there were a few times I threw something out on Twitter, like, hey, if someone wants to order these photos, like I'll pay for it. I signed up for, I forget, a Pacer account, I think it's called. And they said like, you'll receive a postcard in the mail, like to confirm your account. And I was just like, is this 1993? Like, are you serious? So anyway, if it came, I never saw it, or, it landed on a pile. But anyway, so I didn't want to, I certainly wasn't going to break my promise to Garna, but I also didn't want to put any undue pressure on her. But the internal pressure just kept growing. And I thought, you know what, I have nothing to lose. So I reached out to her and just asked her if there was any way that I could at least share some of the photos, just because, just to try to communicate, some of these inconsistencies and some of these questions. And she was very gracious and said, enough time has passed, so go for it, fight the fight for justice. So she is the reason that I can do this live tonight, and I owe her a debt of gratitude. Before I get started, I did start a petition. Please consider signing this petition. It's to get Phoenix police to consider opening up a real investigation into Joe's death. And I'll get more into that, like what I mean by real investigation. But you can just go to bit.ly JR for Joe Ryan -petition. Okay. Another thing is, as I thought through this, I thought, I don't want to go back into the Facebook groups for multiple reasons. I mean, overall, I've had an overwhelmingly positive experience in Facebook groups. It was pretty devastating to have the group that I had probably spent more than 100 hours writing posts, to see that get shut down by Facebook. I think that was incredibly unfair of Facebook to do. I mean, it's their platform, but come on. But anyway, so what I decided to do was start a group. I'm not actually going to be that involved in the group until the trial. So the plan was to wait until the trial, start a group so that I can get away from Facebook. So I can get away from YouTube lives. I do like doing the lives. I like the platform. I think YouTube has the best platform for defending yourself against trolls. Twitter has the absolute worst. But for each video I do, I get at least minimum 100, somewhere between 100 and 200 troll, comments and stuff. So it just gets a little wearisome to have to monitor that so closely. And some of them, they're just very cruel, and they're the same people, creating 50, 60 accounts and saying the same thing. So I created this group with the help of my absolutely amazing friends and the people I would, give a lung to. So they are going to be the moderators and the admins. They're really going to run the group. It is called Annie Cushing's Cool Cats and Criminals. It's a private Facebook group. You can get to it by going to bit.ly CCC for cool cats and criminals. I just want to be able to come in and say, hey, what's up, cool cats? And I know the criminals will be in there too. No, I don't know. And then FB group. A couple things. There aren't going to be any alt accounts. So if you've been using Facebook groups with an alt account, it's a brooding ground for trolls. And we really want people to be able to like stand by their comments, their criticisms, their insights and stuff. And that's really been one of my biggest complaints with Facebook groups, is just the degree of cowardice of people hiding behind alt accounts and then being cruel. So feel free to sign up for that if you are so inclined. The reason I'm saying that is not to be self-promotional, but what I did was I took the photos that aren't too gruesome. I like all of the ones where Joe is on his bed, even though the police obfuscate some of it. I didn't include those. Those were really more for like my discovery. I don't want to traumatize anyone. I don't want the group to be reported, but there's a lot in these photos. And one thing I've seen with being part of these Facebook groups is that you guys are absolutely brilliant. People will catch things, just like the most amazing things. And there's a lot, because I'll get to this, but I think that his apartment was quite possibly tossed. And as a result, there's a lot in there, and I'll hit on a lot of it tonight, but I put the photos out in the group. I do not want them public. I mean, this was my brother, and obviously he's dead. He's decomposed. He would be, if he were alive, he would be absolutely mortified at strangers picking through his apartment and the mess in his apartment and the signs of just, how destitute he was when he died. And so I just want to keep these photos in this group. It's not to build the group. I don't care about the group. I really won't be very active until the trial. And then in lieu of the YouTube lives, I will do lives in the group with the safety of just having a group that's locked down with verified accounts. But anyway, so I just want these pictures kept in here. One, just for the sake of his dignity, but then, I mean, he's not alive to have dignity, but just dignity. But then also, I really want to see what people come up with. And so I'm going to be monitoring, like that's really the post I'm going to be monitoring most closely. And I know it's going to be like chew the meat, spit out the bones, but after about a month, maybe, I'm going to go through, compile all of the findings that are, particularly astute or, jump out at me. And I'm going to pull them together and I'm going to lob them over the fence at Phoenix Police and say, here you go. You think you can manage with this? So anyway, so that's the intent there. I mean, you can join anytime. The moderators are, most of them are in the live helping keep trolls out. Okay, so we're going to go down. Now we're just going to kick it into the far left lane. So why do I want an investigation? Some will say, oh, his death was already investigated. I do not believe that it was investigated because it was, the autopsy found that he died of basically a heart attack, and the manner was of his death was considered natural, and so there was no investigation. And then Phoenix, kind of succumbed to some pressure, and they were very careful in how they chose their words. They said, "We'll review the case," but given the fact that there were quite a few things that I had brought to Phoenix Police attention publicly, I just want this all to be, I mean, if they contact me, I'm happy to talk to them. But I did not have a good conversation with the detective who is over Joe's case, and he was very condescending. But I don't care. I just want them to investigate the case. So so their decision to not investigate was based on the autopsy, but the autopsy was based on an external examination. And this is something that I've been, and I will like actually show this the screenshot, the actual text. I just didn't want it to be too distracting as I talked about this point. But when I was on the Nancy Grace podcast, she had a number of people on that particular episode, and one of them was an ME. And so we were all chatting before we went live, and I said something about the autopsy, and I don't know how it came about, but I said, well, yes, except, I mean, the autopsy was largely based on an external examination. And, there was like all this like kind of cross chatter and stuff. And he was like, wait, what do you mean? And I said, yeah, it was based on an external examination. And he said, they didn't open him up. And I said, no. And so, I mean, this was one person's opinion, but he said, well, then it shouldn't have been ruled natural. If they didn't open him up, it should have been ruled unknown. Cause unknown. And the profiling evil guys, love them. They also brought on an ME, and she had an interesting take. She said that, and I'm going to be really quoting her very loosely, but basically, in a case like this, where there's a protracted custody battle and there are kind of psychographic signals that, not everything was as it should have been, that will oftentimes warrant, in and of itself, that will warrant an investigation. And so, neither of these were taken into account. There was this external examination, and they did test his blood, and they looked at his medical history and the meds that he had in his apartment and ruled it natural. But also, no one was asking about him. They couldn't track down any family members. I've talked about that pretty extensively. So another thing that I just noticed this week that I had never noticed before, this was in the summary of the incident report from the day that Joe was found, which was April 3rd, 2018, ironically, our father's birthday. But it said there was no evidence of trauma or suspicions for foul play. So I also wondered if that could have played a part in the ME just saying, well, I think this is a pretty open and shut case. Joe was 59. He was overweight at the time, not by a lot, but according to their estimation, he was overweight and had a history of heart issues. And our family does have a history of heart issues. But I just wonder how much I had never seen this before. Once again, shout out to Garna. I didn't remember that she had sent me the full incident report. So I only had 6 pages, and the full incident report is actually 12. So I also shared that in the group. Yeah, all right. I put this in here so that it would trigger me what my point was, and then I forgot what it was anyway. So one of the things that I've said this so many times. I have no medical training. I have no training in law enforcement. I have nothing except just a crap ton of grit to chase this down. But having said that, one of the things that I noticed in the pictures, and there's only been one person who has seen the graphic pictures, and I only say her name, Janice, just so that I never want to be in a position where, or I rarely want to be in a position where people have to believe me, where they just have to, trust that I'm telling the truth and I'm not allowing emotion to just carry me away and cut corners on this. But in the pictures where Joe was on the bed, and this might be a little triggering, so if you have a sensitive stomach, please, hit pause, hit mute. I'll be finished in less than 2 minutes. In the pictures where Joe is on the mattress, so before they remove him, there is definitely blood. You can see it in the areas of the picture that aren't covered by these, white squares. But when his body is no longer on the mattress, it is saturated. I don't want to be grotesque, but it was pretty clear that it looked as if, just judging by the difference in the state of the mattress, that he had essentially imploded. That might not be the best word. But Lori also talked about the mattress. And one thing that's really interesting, between the time that I made this slide and the time that I went live, I referenced this on Facebook, but I was just curious tonight, like, have I seen all of the text messages? Because the search feature in messages, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute, the search feature in the messages app, if you're an iPhone user, it leaves a lot to be desired. And that's largely what I relied on using my laptop, because then it's easier to get screenshots and stuff. So tonight I was just curious. And so I actually flipped. I just kept flipping, until I got back to April 2018. And there was actually something that Lori said, and I'll get to that a little bit later, that where she actually gave a time frame. So she made this claim that that I thought at the time she had said that one of the police officers, so I've talked about this before, I talked about this on Dateline, her claim was that 2 police officers let her and Tylee into the apartment to get any effects that Tylee wanted. And she said that initially they didn't want to let her in, her meaning Lori. And Lori said, hey, Tylee's a minor. I'm her mom. I'm not sending her in there without me. And she brought out a box of photo albums, which I will get to. And also, she had told me that there were piles and piles of files along the wall of Joe's bedroom. And she made fun of him, like, what a freak, that was he, still going through all these old files years later. But she also said, I thought at the time that she had said that the police officers described the state of the mattress. But I actually found out when I went through the text, and I'm not trying to pull a BuzzFeed, it seemed more intuitive to put it in this other spot in the presentation. But I actually found out that she gave me the week that she had gone in, and her claim was that the mattress, the bloody mattress, was still in the apartment when they went in there. But it gets even more outrageous than that. So, but when I was just researching some of these things, like my search history would be alarming if someone went in there. But I was looking to see what could cause that, and the answer, this was months ago. And then today, once again, with going back through, or this weekend, going back through the different documents, I caught something that I had never noticed before. There is evidence of moderate decomposition. Now, the police actually said, they didn't say extreme, advanced decomposition. And that actually seems to be more in line with, from non-professional opinion. It seems to be more in line with moderate decomposition, but maybe they're working with different protocols. I don't know. As indicated by bloating of the body with extensive skin slippage and green discoloration. So this gets a little gross, but with the skin slippage, what can happen is if you move the body or there's, any stress to the skin, it basically gives way. And without, any more detail, I am under the impression that that's probably what happened with Joe, given the, I mean, it's a pretty extreme difference in the mattress. I'm not exaggerating. But so that also begs the question, like how, and I'm not in any way trying to undermine the ME. I'm not saying he's not capable. I know that, yeah, I mean, this comes down to, budgets, and they have to decide where they're going to, focus their efforts. So I'm not in any way, trying to malign him. But I do question how effective an external examination would be. Just from what I can deduce, was probably the state of Joe's body, and there is more detail in the autopsy if you're so inclined. Okay, so that's the first question. I just really question how reliable an external examination would be, especially given the fact that it's not like he was found within hours. And we know from the person who reported it, he said that he had last seen Joe approximately 10 days prior. And given the state of decomposition, it looks like he was dead for most likely a week to 2 weeks. Okay, so this is a big question, and you'll see where I'm going with this. I have really big questions on when Joe last saw Tylee. So when I was there in 2018, I was really careful not to ask Tylee questions about her dad. I didn't know where she was, and I didn't want to come in as, her aunt. It just, kind of like, hey, I'm your long lost aunt. Let me ask you all these personal questions. So the only question that I asked her that I remember regarding Joe was when she had last seen Joe. And one thing I will say, and I always thought that her reaction, because she seemed a little deer in the headlights, and you've seen a little bit of Tylee's personality if you've seen the body cam footage from when they were in Gilbert Police Department. She's pretty, like she was very strong. She takes things in stride, so she's not like a particularly nervous person. I mean, she was a badass, but so she just looked vulnerable and like a little deer in the headlights. And I noticed Lori was standing behind me and a little bit to my left. And so I saw her look up at Lori, and I felt really bad because I thought, oh man, like maybe I shouldn't have asked any questions about her dad. But she did answer. She told me that it had been a little over a year. And so I just kind of filed that away. And I mean, it was sad. It was sad to think that Joe hadn't seen her in more than a year. But then I noticed when this was early on when I came into possession of this incident report, that it said that Lori told, so the police called her on April 13th, and Lori had told them that she had not heard from Joseph in about 2 years. So immediately, right there, especially knowing the serious issues that Lori has with honesty, this was a red flag. And this has been a really frustrating red flag, because where there's smoke, there's fire. Why is there such a dramatic difference between what Tylee told me and what Lori told me? But then I've been in contact off and on with one of the moms, so more than one mom, but one mom in particular who was, her daughter was friends with Tylee. And I asked her if she knew. And she had told me that shortly after Tylee moved to Hawaii, and that was a heartbreaking event for Joe, I know. But shortly after she moved, she had come back to Phoenix to visit with him, and she went to girls' camp, and that was June of 2014. And they had moved sometime in early 2014, maybe April, May, something like that. So there was only a little bit of time, if I'm understanding the timeline correctly. And Tylee had come back for this girls' camp, and she stayed with her dad, and it didn't go particularly well. Tylee also got sick, but the friend's mom told me that when Tylee at some point after Tylee got back to Hawaii, she called her dad and had the talk with him and let him know that she didn't want to see him anymore. So that was sometime in 2014. We don't know exactly when that was, but it was sometime after that visit, which was in June 2014. So now that presents a third date. So from this mom's point of view, and she wasn't as involved, like the last year of Tylee's life, so there is room for, like maybe Tylee agreed to see him and her friend didn't know about it. I try to consider all of the options. But we have 3 different times that, we have June 2014, and there is something in one of the photos. In fact, the photo from the office that kind of is a hat tip to that. I'll get to that. So we have this June 2014 date. We have somewhere around like early 2017, because Tylee had said it had been a little more than a year. And then we have 2016, according to Lori. So, and that's enough to make it onto my radar. One thing that I also noticed, so Keith Taniguchi had mentioned when he was interviewed by Justin Lum, he had been Joe's attorney, his criminal attorney. And he had said that Joe, I think he might have said that Joe had 3 DUIs in a year. I might be remembering that incorrectly. It had been over a period of years. I think his first one might have been 2001, something like that. Not that I am in any way discounting DUIs. The second one was actually an extreme DUI. It was his blood alcohol was 0.20. And so there's serious issues there. But in October 2014, he had gotten his 3rd DUI. And we know from Keith that he had gone to Gilbert and stayed with him for a little bit. I think stayed with someone else. Then he thought he went to New York. He didn't come to New York. He would have gone to New Jersey, where he grew up in Westville. And if that sounds unusual to anyone to say where he grew up, if you don't know our story, we grew up in foster care in separate homes. So he grew up in a town called Westville. And at one point in one of the records, he actually had a New Jersey driver's license. So at some point in all of this, he had actually kind of hunkered down in Jersey for a while. So October 2014, he gets this DUI. And you can see here that the disposition date is March of 2015. So then I just found this last night. And it was just a comment. Like I was just reading through all these comments. I reached out to someone who had commented on quite a bit of his stuff. She was a very nice lady. She had been a friend from high school, and just searching, always searching. But on Thursday, October 8th of 2015, he made this comment that said, "What up? I'm moving back to Austin next week." Now, I think he thought he was replying to someone who had commented on one of his pictures, but it was like one of those things where like he didn't actually, it wasn't embedded under someone else's comment. So it ended up being, a little random. But that, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because that fits. That helps tell a story. Joe had gotten this call in 2014 that Tylee didn't want to see him anymore. Sometime later, He gets the DUI. He has to stick around for the, for the disposition date, whatever was involved with that. And then you can see he's just like, that's it. I'm a bounce. He loved Austin. That was his absolute favorite city to live. So I wasn't surprised that he would move back to Austin. The sad thing to me was that, yeah, Tylee, I think at that point he was like, they may never come back. And even if they do, my daughter has said she doesn't want to see me. And so this, to me, this just seems like, it's a sad point, but it's a point on the timeline. So at some point in 2015, he moved to Austin, but I think because he was just kind of in flux, we don't have like solid dates for any of that. If anyone is listening to this and you have any kind of dates, I would greatly appreciate any information. Part of what helps me do what I do is just the people who reach out to me, and share things and say, please don't share this with, publicly or anything like that. But I get a lot of pieces, even if I can't share a lot of these details, it does help me understand the story. Okay, so having given that as a backdrop, this causes some confusion for me when I look at his office. Now, keep in mind, he had bounced around a lot. We know he moved to Austin. We know he was couch surfing. He stayed at Keith Taniguchi's. I think he said like a brother or a friend of his or something. And then he went to New Jersey. So he would have been pretty light, like you don't need Marie Kondo telling you to minimize, the junk in your trunk if you're, kind of in the wind like Joe was. And if, what he said is accurate, about him being unemployable, that would certainly factor into that, so it wouldn't make sense to me that he would keep a lot of stuff. And we do see evidence of that in his apartment. But now we're going to jump into the room that I have really big questions about. So first off, and I broke this up into groups just so that I can it's because I'm an analyst. But first off, there are some indicators in here that when I started going inch by inch, there were some indicators that, wait a minute, was he preparing for a trip? First off, I noticed that there were these dress shirts over here. First off, and I will get more into this, the fact that his apartment is as much of a wreck as it is, and that has caused me so many questions, because when I knew Joe, and I actually lived with Joe for a month when I aged out of foster care, he had convinced me to move to Albuquerque and go to school there, and that didn't go well. But we lived together for that month, and Joe was absolutely fastidious. He was like, look up perfectionist in the dictionary and it says, see Joseph Anthony Ryan. He really was that much of a perfectionist, and it made it really difficult to live with him. And I wasn't a slob by any measure, but it made it difficult to learn his systems and stuff. So this room caught my attention for that, and even applying the depression discount, and it's clear that he's depressed. He is cash strapped. You see, notices and, creditors, letters from creditors all over the apartment. I will actually address some of that. But so for the Joe that I knew, it is unusual to see shirts just, thrown off to the side, especially that top one. You can see that looks like a pretty nice shirt. It has a nice sheen. He had impeccable taste. So not a big deal, but just notable. Then, of course, there's the suitcase. I don't know how I didn't notice that when I first started looking at all these pictures. I think some of it was just that, I think there's a total of 131 pictures. So there's a lot. So, there's this suitcase and it's out in the room, but then this one really got me. This, I travel a lot. And immediately this jumped out at me when I was zoomed in. I was like, that looks like a travel pillow. And that does not look like a travel pillow a dude would use. And when you kind of zoom in on it, it appears to me, even like with the stitching and stuff, that appears to be like similar to this travel pillow. And you see them in polka dots all the time. I'm not sure why. Maybe it helps hide dirt. Next up, there's this, you see this edge of a duffel bag, but again, when you look at it zoomed in, there are hearts. There are pink, lime green, shout out to all my lime green lovers, and like baby blue hearts on this duffel bag. And so, clearly this isn't Joe's duffel bag. And so again, I was just like, when I got to this part, I was really mystified. And then there's this bag over here, and another shout out to Janice. She actually tracked down what bag it was, because she saw that it was there was a little bit of the Nike swoosh. I mean, that girl has an eagle eye, and she just searched like older bags like this, and found, I think she found it on eBay, because you can't find this particular bag anywhere. And she actually had like arrows from the strap, like strap to strap and stuff. It was pretty extraordinary. But yeah, I think that this is that bag. And now I don't think that this bag would have been Joe's, only because he had his own bag. And there's actually a picture of him on Facebook with that bag. So maybe not. I think the other bag is a little more yellow. So not quite as masculine. That's not like a statement about masculinity, more his taste. And so this just left me with a lot of questions. But then there were other items in this group, like this particular group of items, that appear to be kind of like either memoirs or gifts. And so the first one is this. I can't really tell what this is. And I did try to do a reverse image search. I couldn't find it. At first I thought it was a gift, but it looks worn, like maybe a journal or something like that. So I don't know if like maybe he kept a journal for her, or maybe she had journaled. I know like with my kids, I had kept a journal that I started when I was pregnant with them, and just noted different things. And for my one child, who we adopted from foster care, when we got him. So maybe it's something like that. But again, it looks particularly feminine to me, and like a younger girl. And then next up, you see that I noticed that there was like these, it looks like a flyer for like school portraits, because I've seen a lot of these over the years. And once again, Janice zoomed in and turned it sideways and saw that it said Spring Photography 2014. So remember that June 2014 date, where the Tylee's friend's mom said that was the last time Tylee saw her dad. So it just makes me wonder, especially given how cruel Lori is and was to Joe, it was that possibly the last time he had like school photos of Tylee. And we know by the end she was homeschooled. I use that word very, very loosely. When I was there, I mean, Tylee was sleeping till like noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think she basically got her GED, and she was a really, really smart girl. And next up, this one mystified me the most. To me, this looks like a jewelry box. Others have said it looks like blocks. I'm like, maybe that like you could put up on the wall. I think it's too young of a design. Like Tylee at that point would have been 15. And so, but then also you see over here that looks like a new barcode. I mean, if this picture just had a little more resolution, I almost feel like I could like scan it and then find out what it is. But yeah, it's not quite enough resolution. But okay, and I just want to note that these are different from the keepsakes he had of Tylee. So the only decorations you see in his entire apartment, are these pictures of Tylee. And you know, that's sad to see. It's sad for me because Joe was an extraordinary decorator. Like I put decorations on walls so that I don't look like Data from Star Trek. I don't notice them. They don't really do anything for me. I just want to look kind of normal, so I put things up on the walls. But Joe was an absolutely fabulous decorator and really got into it. And so I was very surprised when I saw the apartment initially. I thought he must have like just moved in, but I'll make the case. This was with Garna's help. I think today that no, he had been in this apartment for a while. So you see the photos over there, and then you see these items here, and clearly these were things that he kept from when Tylee was younger. Okay, so more indicators that he might have been getting ready to travel. This was the toothbrush in his bathroom. And I noticed that amongst all of the travel, kind of accoutrements actually, that were in the office, there was this Sonicare toothbrush. And so, obviously it wouldn't really make sense to keep your Sonicare toothbrush in your office instead of your bathroom. So I just wondered if he was going on a trip possibly, or he thought he was going on a trip with Tylee and didn't want to be embarrassed by the state of his toothbrush, because otherwise, why not just have it in the bathroom? He also, you can see here, there's a brand new hair dye bottle that looks like it was used, and you can see a glove, and also the clippers are out. So one of my daughters is a vintage hair and makeup stylist, and so I was like, okay, what are these used for? Like, what, if I'm a dude, like why would I use these? And she said, oh, he most likely used them to trim up his beard. He had a goatee and a mustache, and so another thing about the glove, it might be something, it might be absolutely nothing, but I did take note that there's only one of them, so that's a little weird. But then also, it's not facing in like the most intuitive direction. Like you take off gloves, it would kind of, like if you put hair dye in, you're going to have to jump in the shower and use those gloves again, and then you typically discard the gloves. And so it kind of makes sense that you would like take them off and face them in the opposite direction, because you're going to use them again to rinse out your hair or whatever. So again, it's definitely not like a smoking gun, but an indicator that it does appear that he was preening. He was getting ready for something. Then I also noticed on the desk in his office, there was a camera, and on the floor in the office, amidst all of like the kind of girl stuff, I noticed what looks to be a used film canister, whatever that's called. It's been so long since I've used one. But so it just made me wonder, was he getting the camera ready for something? And he discovered, oh my God, because no one uses film anymore. So was he getting the camera ready, and then noticed that there was used up film in there? I just don't know. It's a curiosity. These aren't typically things that you see sitting out just for like everyday kind of thing. a big question I have, and I have gone through these photos with a fine-tooth comb. That does not mean that I am not capable of missing something, because I certainly am. But nowhere in any of these photos have I seen Joe's phone. And that, to me, that's very concerning, because the incident report said that they did not collect any of his items, that they left the apartment as it was and they were waiting for the results of the autopsy. So they didn't take anything, according to the incident report. So you would expect to see the phone here, and it's not. And again, feel free to join the group, start poking through the photos. I would love for someone to find evidence of a phone. We've found everything from what appears to be a version 2 Nintendo DS, a portable charger. I mean, we've certainly found different electronic items, but not a phone. There's an iPad by the front door, but I can't find a phone. And so the reason I'm advocating so hard is that, depending on his carrier, there is an expiration date. These phone companies, like, I want Phoenix police to, at minimum, just get I just wonder, did someone arrange something with Joe? Because Joe's apartment was a bit of a fortress, so they wouldn't have been able to just break in the front door. If you've watched the Dateline episode, he had a secondary lock. I also have pictures of it. So his apartment was pretty locked down, and that secondary lock you couldn't even access it from the outside, only the inside. As I said on Dateline, that's an indicator to me of a man who was living in fear. So like, in my mind, something would have had to possibly lure him to open himself up to Lori, or whoever. And again, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. There is the possibility that Joe died of natural causes, and all of these things are just weird happenstance. There is that possibility. I am not saying that that Phoenix police need to investigate his death, because I am convinced that he was murdered. I'm saying that I do not believe that Phoenix police has done their due diligence in this case. If I, with such limited information, can poke through these photos and find issues in them, I just think, like, at bare minimum, order his electronics, so that if something comes up later on, we don't find out, like, oh, you know what, he was with Metro PCS and they've already destroyed his records. So I'm really, really hoping he was with AT&T or T-Mobile. They, according to US News and World Report, they hold on to their records the longest. Okay. Another question I have: why was Lori deceptive in her notes from PPD? So let's jump into that. So when I was there in May 2018, she showed me this piece of paper where she had taken notes when someone from Phoenix Police called her. And it was Detective Smith. He originally was the detective over Joe's case. Another guy, Johnny something, it'll come to me, inherited Joe's file. So, there are these notes, and I had thrown this out in True Crime Underground, and I wish I remembered who it was, but someone pointed out that it looked like the 8 had been written over. And sure enough, when we really took a look at this, and there just happened to be a lot of 8s on this piece of paper, which is pretty incriminating. Lori's 8s did not, this is how I do my 8s. I start in the middle, I, circle around, but that's not how she does her 8s. She does them like this. So I did wonder about that. And so I went back to the incident report, and sure enough, they had called her on April 13th. So, again, it's just like, if you have nothing to be ashamed of, if you have nothing to be nervous about, why lie? Why go back over a 3 and make it an 8? Like, you gained 5 days. I mean, it was still super horrible that you didn't call me. So what's the difference of 5 days? Is that number significant to her? I don't know. But yeah, there was also something else. I think I have it covered up. Oh yeah, I might reference. Oh, do I reference it later? Yeah, I do. Okay, so I'll just keep going. Yeah, this. I just thought that this was weird. Like, would a police officer tell, a former spouse, hey, don't worry. I mean, like I now have an idea of the condition of his body. And I could see maybe, saying something cloying like this if you were talking to the person's spouse and she was distraught, or, just whatever to make her feel better. But I'm sure they were not picking up on distraught when this detective called Lori. So, again, not a big deal, but it just seemed a little weird. Even at the time, I was like, because I hate that stuff. I'm like, oh, he died peacefully. Well, we don't know. Anyway, okay. Was Joe's apartment ransacked? So Tom Ware, he was interviewed by Dateline, and he was one of the guardians ad litem. I think that's the plural for Tylee. The other one was Mary Bogle. I actually spoke to both of them back in 2007, maybe, because I was brought in as part of the investigation. And so, he says here, early in 2007, as Joe's child custody case progressed, Joe believed that someone broke into his apartment through an open window. There were no obvious signs of a forced entry, however. Joe had left his apartment that day to attend a hearing for his custody case with Tylee, and was in court during the time of the alleged break-in. Joe remarked that his papers on his desk were rearranged and that his computers were likely accessed due to both of his computers having blue screens and requiring a reboot. He was so concerned that his work computer had been tampered with that he subsequently reported the incident to his work IT department. I actually saw this in one of the court documents. Joe likely did not report the incident to the police department, although Joe was, and I don't know what the rest of it said. This was just a screenshot that someone had passed on to me. I didn't have the time to dig through those 1,700 pages to try to find the reference that I had read, this same story. It just went into a little bit more detail about the steps that he took work-wise. So first off, you see this pattern in the apartment. Again, might be nothing, might be something. Having already made the case that this is very much outside of Joe's normal MO. But you see that there's this drawer here that's left open. And another weird thing, and I'll get back to the open drawer, is that you see clothes that are on the floor. And again, I might be looking too much into it. Just ignore his underwear over there. But you see these clothes that are on the floor here, but they appear to be clean and folded. So that seems a little weird. And then there are these what appear to be dirty socks on top of clean pants. And so I just, again, there might be a perfectly normal explanation. I know that, like, when I prepare for some of these interviews, I tear through my closet trying to figure out what to wear, but I don't fold them up and put them in neat piles on the floor. They typically they fly into a pile on the bed. Um, but then what was very weird was you see the same open drawers in the bathroom. Now, when they come in and they photograph the apartment, they're photographing it as is. There is one open drawer in the kitchen that was most likely the police probably opened up that one because his medicine bottles were right outside of it. But here, these drawers are empty. So why would Joe have opened up empty drawers? He would know that they're empty. So it just seems odd and notable. The other thing that I noticed all throughout the apartment is that there are these creditor letters, but like everywhere, so like if you're in financially like a really tough spot, and you're naturally like your personality craves order really kind of to an extreme. And we do see evidences of his natural proclivities toward order in these photos, and I'll get to those. But would you want reminders that like you are not this super successful person you used to be? Like in one of my lives, I shared photos of like the house that he and Lori built, custom built. I mean, it was palatial. It was absolutely gorgeous. For most of the time, I knew Joe as adults. He was very successful and he was very driven. So this had to be just absolutely crushing. And I noticed with this one, it's a little blurry, but it says $153. It looks like maybe 36 cents or something like that. But they're offering him a settlement for a bill that's $153. That is not in keeping with the Joe who was the Joe he was when he met Lori before she sucked all the life out of him. Another thing that I don't go into too much in this live, but it is mystifying that this is April. He would have died in late March. But it's not very cold in Phoenix in late March. I actually pulled up the weather, the historical weather. And so I did think it was kind of weird that there's one glove, a black glove sitting on the counter, and either the tips are tucked inside, like he took it off really fast, or maybe like it's a golf glove or a biking glove. I'm not really sure. So I'm just noting it, but I don't know that it's significant at all. But I will really drill down on just the level of chaos and my question of, is this potentially contrived? Knowing Lori's personality, she is, and I actually don't mean this to be cruel or to be insulting, not that I think she deserves any kind of respect, but I do try to keep things kind of as objective as possible. But she's just not a very intelligent person. She is very conniving, and she's been able to rely on her beauty and her personality. But we have seen a pattern of her like kind of taking things to a clownish level, almost like a child would do. And I saw that even with one of the allegations that she made about Joe with Tylee, and it really struck me. And that was when I was there in 2018. It really struck me that she doesn't even know that like this claim she's making, it's not possible. It might be possible, but it's not conceivable. It's not. It's so absolutely gross. I can't repeat it. Like I told one person, and it pained me, and that was just last week. I was like, here's what she said, because it was just absolutely beyond disgusting, and Tylee was standing right there. But anyway, so I just wonder with some of these things, if it isn't like if someone wasn't in the apartment after Joe had already passed and was just trying to make him look worse than he was, or just make it like, kind of like paint her own story. Because like that counter that we saw, that is right when you walk in to the apartment. That's right in the kitchen. This is on the sofa in his living room. So let's take a look at this stuff. Here we have another creditor. That's what this is over here. But then again, to me, this just seems kind of clownish. Like, then there's a lottery ticket, multiple lottery tickets. It looks like four lottery tickets. So it's like, okay, I have this bill. I'm stressed out. I also have this other bill on the kitchen counter, and that doesn't even account for the bills that were strewn all over his office. So I'm going to go and I'm going to play the lottery, because I'm going to try to be able to, like, get on top of all of this. Oh, but all of this is really stressing me out. And so I'm actually going to back this up a little bit. This is a blood pressure monitor. So here he is, monitoring, like measuring his blood pressure with a bill and lottery tickets. And then this here, ACOS. So this is a medical insurance alternative, I guess, for maybe like for people who don't have insurance. I went to their website to try to learn more, but take note of this logo, because we'll see it again. And this is their website here. Obviously you can see the logo. I just pulled it up just to kind of try to figure out. I kind of concluded that he wasn't employed and he didn't have health insurance. But you see all the stuff that someone would use to stretch out their back. He did have back problems, and he did regularly stretch out his back. So, and those things are believable. He would have had them all like lined up in a row in like descending order of like size, or ascending order. He wouldn't have just had them, strewn about. But he also wasn't expecting company. And then here's like just kind of breakdown. And so this is fitting for someone. Now, for me, I'm not from Phoenix. I've never heard of this program. But if you're a police officer, you most likely would recognize this program and recognize this is for someone who doesn't have access to health insurance. This is another pamphlet from that same company, but this I just like flipped around. You can see that logo. And it's same company, but this is in the office, and then there are more in like another area in the living room. So the story that this kind of paints is like, he's just making sure that wherever he walks in his apartment, he's going to be reminded by something that will really stress him out. And I'm not even hitting all of the points. I mean, the coffee table next to the sofa has bills all along the bar, separating the kitchen and the living room. More bills all along his, the desk in his office, on the floor under the desk. Again, depression could do a lot to people, but does it really change a person that much? Maybe. I don't know. These are just questions I have. Another thing that stood out to me is the placement of his wallet. So typically I would think that it's been a minute since I've been married, but you wouldn't think of like a guy coming in and being like, oh, this tiny little wallet is killing me here. I'm just going to take it out and put it on the kitchen counter and leave it there. Like typically you would think of it being like on the nightstand or something like that. Who knows? He could have pulled it out to make a payment. We just don't know. But here you see another bill. This is from a company that insures high risk drivers. This would have been because of his history of DUI. So again, maybe he really just allowed himself to be this surrounded by all of these reminders that, he wasn't the shining star he once was. But, alternatively, this could have been someone, just digging out papers from wherever, and just tossing them about to paint this picture. And this is just the placement of that other ACOS brochures. Okay. Next up, I need to tell a little bit of a story so that you can understand why I was so confused by this picture in particular. This is one. I think anyone who has followed me this long, I am very, very careful, and there's no incentive for me to lie about anything, like in terms of like, oh, let me tell you this story about Joe from the month I was living with him, because I want the truth, regardless of how ugly it is. I want the truth. So the reason that this really stuck with me from the first time I saw these, to be totally honest, the first time I saw this, I was like, bullshit. There's no way. There is no way. And this is why. When I lived with him, I don't even think I made it a month. But as I said, we didn't grow up together. I was basically raised by wolves. And so I was drinking, like a glass of whatever, and I put it down on the table in his living room. And Joe, as he had a tendency to do, he did have a trigger point temper. And he could just go from like 0 to 60. When he was like at the end of the night, every night he would just smoke a little bit of pot. And, that was before it was like, legal or okay to do that. But he would just smoke a little bit, like he wouldn't get stoned, but he would just get a little bit of a buzz. And that was the time that he was so enjoyable to hang out with, because he had this incredible wit, and he was a really caring person. And he was kind of like that third base coach kind of brother, always wanting to, help out and stuff. But when he wasn't buzzing, that's when there were problems. And also keep in mind, from the time that I was 8 to the time that I aged out of foster care at 17, I had only seen Joe 2 times. So one was when he pulled together this Thanksgiving dinner, which I mentioned on Dateline. And one time my dad and I drove down to Florida when he was in the Navy to see him. And to my memory, those were the only 2 times. And I believe my memory is accurate on that. So we even though we were brother and sister, when I moved out there, I really did not know him. And so anyway, so I put this glass down on the table, and he was still in his 20s. It's not like he had really nice furniture. In fact, I think he rented an apartment that came with furniture, if memory serves me. But he just kind of lost his mind. Like in his mind, like that is a no-brainer. Like, of course, everyone goes into adulthood, and technically I wasn't even an adult yet, but you go out into the world, to put your glass on a coaster. I didn't. I don't remember ever once putting a glass on a coaster. I grew up in absolute squalor. And so he just kind of lost his mind about that. And so, after that, of course, I always put a glass on a coaster. But when I saw this picture, I was just like, there is no way. So it kind of looks to me from this picture that when I first saw it, and this was, I think, before they did the follow-up where they actually took the pieces of organ and retested it. But these look like wine glasses to me, in particular, white wine glasses, the red wine. These are stemless wine glasses. So here's a picture of a stemless wine glass. These don't look like water glasses to me. They could be, but the red wine glasses are a little stouter and not as narrow at the top. Not that it matters if it's red or white, but when I saw it, I was like, okay, so what, he's double fisting wine glasses? Like, not that he wouldn't be able to handle 2 glasses of wine, but it almost looks in this scene like he was drunk, like I actually put the glass down, and it looks like he just pushed the coasters out of the way, like, oh, what are these doing here? I want to make sure my glass has contact with my furniture. Not that this is the nicest furniture, but it wasn't back then either. So this is a bit of a stretch for me to think, it is possible. I didn't have contact with Joe for years, so it is absolutely possible. But it is, in my mind, I just can't imagine him going from, freak the F out to, what are these coasters doing here? So I actually did a sweep of the apartment, and I noticed that there was another one. This looks like it had neither cranberry juice or red wine in it. There was an empty bottle of cranberry juice on the kitchen counter. And there are these limes. Sorry, the sink is gross. But there are these limes sitting in the sink. So again, that was one more thing that, when I first saw the pictures, I was like, oh, Joe, like, did he fall off the wagon? And that is entirely possible. But there is also, if you look at the pictures, there are AA, or like books about sobriety. There's one right next to all the travel stuff for Tylee. There's another one in his bedroom. So who knows? Thankfully, I've never struggled with alcoholism. So, who knows? It might be like a man walking upstairs with a yo-yo. You might be up and down, but overall making progress. I don't know. These are just notable. However, all these indicators would seem to indicate someone who has a very serious potentially like struggle with alcohol, because there's just alcohol everywhere. It just seems like he can't go from one room to the next without, a glass of something. But when they did retested his organs, there was no alcohol in his blood. So, I was just kind of like, okay, you have 2 wine glasses, and then, another wine glass in the living room, and limes in the kitchen sink. Everything seems to indicate that he had alcohol that night, but he didn't. So, again, it's just another question. And so I did a sweep of the apartment to see if, like, his characteristic, like, because he just had coasters everywhere when I lived with him. And when I looked at his desk, sure enough, here are 2 coasters. So, he's ready for action here. There are no glasses over there, but there are the coasters. And then this, to me, this was a smoking gun. When I saw this, and I just saw this a couple days ago, I was like, there it is. That's the Joe I know. This guy was so neurotic about any kind of moisture from, we didn't have water bottles back then. This was the 80s. You drank water from the tap. But like at that time, like glasses, and I did hang out with him when there were water bottles. But, even when we hung out, like he was just always, like, he was much nicer when my kids were there. And when I was visiting him, he was like, oh, here's a coaster, so we all grow and mature. But this I just found to be absolutely hilarious because I was like, yes, this is in keeping with the 1980, 85 Joe I encountered, as well as, what I encountered when I would visit him. But I mean, I don't remember him actually using coasters on a kitchen counter. I mean, it's not even like this was his first home, and like he's just trying to take really good care of it. This was an apartment, like a kind of okay, pretty bare bones apartment, but he's like, nope, it belongs on a coaster. And there we go, another coaster on a surface that doesn't need a coaster. So seeing this again, I just, when I looked at the pictures in his bedroom, I was just like, yeah, this doesn't gel. Like, how do you, in one room, you're like, I want to protect the kitchen counter, and the kitchen counter was a mess, and then in your bedroom, on one of the few pieces of furniture you have in your apartment, you're like, whatever, move this coaster out of the way. So another thing that I noticed, this was bothersome. So obviously this is his router. And this was what made me absolutely convinced he must have just moved into the apartment, because this is jerry-rigged. You see that it is plugged into an extension cord, which goes up the side of the guest bathroom. So this router is plugged into the bathroom, sitting on the floor where he would have to step over it anytime he used the bathroom. That particular bathroom. And, I checked in the office, there were outlets, so who knows, maybe the electricity went out. He didn't want the super to see that he had modified the door. There are other explanations, but this also, another explanation could be that someone wanted to make him look like a colossal loser who had just kind of given up on life, was just chaotic. And and the people coming into this apartment, which from my research would have smelled horrifically. I watched a YouTube video about it. And, it smelled, the bedroom was a disaster. The bed was a disaster. They clearly didn't have an easy time moving his body. And so all of these things, they could potentially weigh into whether or not this person has any kind of indication that there was foul play. Okay. Oh, I already shared that. So I thought for sure he must have just moved in. But once again, Garna coming in, she had mentioned months ago about the incident report, mentioned that the address on his driver's license was this Baseline Road, and that's where he lived. But again, I didn't have the full incident report. So when she sent it to me today, or I didn't think I had it, sure enough, the address on the driver's license was this Baseline Road. Now, again, this is the analyst in me. There is the possibility that he just updated his address on his driver's license, but the issue date is September 5th, 2017, and this was April 2018. So he would have been there at least 7 months. Again, unless, and I did look into Arizona's policy in terms of updating an address. Arizona doesn't play. Like, they want you to update your address on your driver's license within 10 days. I don't know a single person who would do that, except maybe Joe. But I don't know if they restart the issue date. I just wasn't able to chase that down, and I had other stuff to do, like work. And so when I talk about, Joe being fastidious, so I'm working on this project where I'm taking all of my photos and digitizing them. And so I came across different pictures that had just been in boxes and stuff. And I came across this one. There's actually kind of a funny story behind this one. So when our dad died, that's not the funny part, in 1990, there was this big fight over who was going to get the photo albums, especially between Joe and another brother, Tom, who passed away a few months after Joe. And Tom thought we should all divvy them up. And Tom was absolutely right. But Joe was the strongest personality in the family. And so he insisted on taking the photo albums, and he was going to, divide them up and send them out to us. So I did eventually get an envelope with a few pictures. Now, there weren't any pictures of me in this, and you can't see it. And it looks like I just got a brand new computer today, and my camera works fine when I tested it with a test video. It didn't work when I started, so I would hold it up because it is hilarious. He sent me this photo, but he blew it up to 8x10 because I think he was like, damn, I look good. Yeah, this is going to be 8x10, and send it to me. But it is useful in just showing just how fastidious he was. Like my other brother, he's like baseball hat, just super chill, whatever. Clearly the milkman's kid. But Joe, like, everything had to be perfect. He always had the most recent fashion. This was 1990. His gig line was perfect. Like, his buttons line up with his fly and his belt. I mean, everything had to be perfect. So that was Joe. But you also see evidence of this tendency to be like really neat and specific and organized, even in his closets. So in this apartment, his closet was divided up into 2 closets. I guess it was supposed to be like a his and her. And you see his clothes, like, his pants are neatly lined up, his belts are neatly lined up, like everything is in its place. I do wonder if potentially someone just like pulled the jeans that we saw on the floor from this top shelf here and just left them on the floor. Even here, oops, I could be wrong about this, but it kind of, and you don't have like a really good shot of this closet, but it kind of looks like when he wears a shirt, he puts it on the top, and like the shirts that haven't been worn yet, like where you see like the really crisp lines, they're on the bottom, and that would be on brand for Joe. Okay, why was Joe's window open? There's another question I have. So going back to the incident report, I never want to assume that people are familiar with all of the minutia in the story. It says police arrived on scene and contacted Roy. So Roy Zelinica, he was the one who called in the welfare check, who had seen Joe approximately 10 days prior. They then contacted the maintenance person for the complex, Rory James. Rory could not open the front door because the secondary lock was engaged from the inside. Rory then used a ladder to access the balcony and entered in through an open window after removing the screen, which was still in place. So the screen was in the window, but the window was open. And it must have been open pretty far for them to like flag it, because if you look at the door, and here by way of reminder, or if you haven't seen this, here's what the door looked like from the inside. You have this secondary lock up here. From the outside, here's a clever one, you cannot see that other lock. So, this is, to me, this is an indicator of a man living in fear. But I also took note of, clearly this would have been the easier window to enter. So the other window must have been, pretty obviously open, because you can actually get like locks that, like, if you just open it a little bit, you can attach a lock so that someone, from the inside, of course, so that someone can't open the window all the way. But the window and the back was open. So this Rory climbed in through this window. He took the screen out and climbed in through this window. So I have, and this is obviously Joe's apartment. I mean, Joe's bedroom. Sorry. And so I have questions about this, of course. So at the time of the welfare check, just minutes after this was when they arrived. So the temperature for that day was 84 degrees. That makes sense. But they took a picture of the thermostat in the apartment, and it was set at 74, and you see the indicator that the air conditioning was on. So putting yourself in the position of someone, and I'm cheap. I'm not even cash strapped. I'm cheap. Like, there's just no way I'm going to have like a window open and the AC set to 34. But so I do wonder about that. Like, okay, if I'm cash strapped and I need a settlement plan for a $153 bill, and I just use that by way of measurement, like by contrast, not in any way trying to like poverty shame Joe in any way. But if I need a settlement plan for $153, And, I live in New York City. You live in small apartments, even small apartments, they're expensive. I never keep the AC at 74, but Joe always liked it really cold. But, so that's not an insignificant amount of money. Would he, possibly, but like, would he have the window open also? And then I also noticed that because the incident report mentioned when I read the full one, it mentioned something about a fan. So I initially thought this was a heater, but it makes more sense that it's a fan, but it might be a multi-purpose. But it said something about a fan, and I had already noticed that it was unplugged. So the window is right behind the TV. If it had been like a nice night, and it could have been, when he actually passed away, I had looked at the temperatures, they were pretty decent, and they got hot in the morning. But, if he had left the window open, why not turn the fan on? But then again, so the fan's not on and the AC is set to 74. And we also know that there was this prior incident where he suspected that someone entered through a window. So, again, I just think it's enough that we should not be dismissing this case. Okay, the other question I have, I know, so many questions. Why is there no mold on the food? So in the kitchen, I've certainly had enough food go moldy on me. But in the kitchen, you see like two things of bread here. And someone mentioned today that like this kind of bread, I can't stand white bread, but this kind of French a French loaf, I think it is, it goes moldy pretty fast. So we know that it had been somewhere between a week to, maybe 10 plus days. When Rory said, or no, not Rory, when Roy said, he thought he saw Joe 10 days before. Obviously, he didn't think that, some crazy woman would one day be like mentioning this in a YouTube live. So I'm not trying to hold him to 10 days, but, there was just judging by the state of decomposition of his body and the state of the mattress, there was at least minimum a week. And there's no mold. Also, you see two different packages of tortillas. For what we see here, I don't see any evidence of mold. And then once again, he leaves this tomato sauce, so spaghetti sauce, I'm assuming, out, and I don't see any evidence of mold in here either. So, I'm just kind of like, was this whole scene staged, just like I said earlier, just to make it look like a man who's just living in total chaos? Okay, why are there women's sunglasses in his bathroom? Okay, so here in the corner of, this isn't the guest bathroom, this is his bathroom. This was one of the first things I noticed. You see women's sunglasses. Now, Joe did not wear sunglasses like that. He was always like the, kind of Ray-Ban kind of sunglasses, even his regular glasses. He just really liked that rectangular shape. And it's really distorted because of it's dark. But if you zoom in on the bar between the kitchen and the living room, you do see a pair of sunglasses that look like these on the bar. Okay, but as long as I've known Lori, she's always had a gravitational pull toward this particular style of sunglasses. And by style, I mean, like, I've only seen her in like brown, like with a brown tint. Now, of course, so do, tens, hundreds of thousands of other women. Obviously, this is not a DNA sample, but as I look at pictures of her with different sunglasses, actually, those might be black. I see, quite a few, even though like this is a different style, you see that then that is definitely a brown lens and trim. Okay, now, of course, we all know potential other explanations for why there would be women's sunglasses, and they could have been there for days from before his apartment was a wreck. I do feel confident that Joe would not have allowed someone into his apartment with it in the state that it was in. He was just too proud. He was too proud of just his supreme organization skills. But, they could have been there a while. Who knows? Why are there no pics of the garage? So we have a total of, I think it was 131 photos. And you see, and the incident report mentions the garage on the first floor. So the garage was underneath the apartment, but they didn't take any pictures. And who knows? I guess there's the remote possibility they could have withheld them in the Freedom of Information Act request. I can't imagine that there would be something that would be damaging to his his privacy. It just would have been a car. It looks to be a pretty small garage, but it is a question mark. Okay, so those I think are all of my questions. I do want to revisit 2007. So in the midst of pulling together all of the photos for this digitizing project, I came across a discovery that was really surprising. I'm not trying to add undue weight to them. I was thinking, so typically when I put pictures in an album, it's maybe a year or longer has passed, and I order up the pictures chronologically and I put them in the album, and you see the album, the paper here, because I just took a picture immediately. I took a weird picture just because that is one of my daughters in a bikini, and that's Colby. So this was from our vacation with Lori and Charles, and there were just kids everywhere. Charles' kids. Tylee was she was a preschooler for this vacation. Colby was young, and so Lori had invited us. We were already living in Florida, and so she had invited us to join them in Hollywood Beach, Florida, for this vacation. And so I agreed to do it. We drove so we could leave anytime, but it was all expenses paid. It was absolutely amazing. Both Lori and Charles, I've talked about this before, they were really generous. It was like a kid's dream vacation in a lot of respects. There were aspects to it that definitely were not dreamlike. I can't share them though, because they're not my story to share. But one thing that I had put these pictures in front of our 4th of July pictures from that year. One of my kids has a birthday on the 4th of July, and because I must have thought at the time that this vacation happened before the 4th of July. But as I was going through them, and we have a ton of pictures from this vacation, so I'm just ripping everything out of the photo album, and just happened to notice that only one of the pictures had a timestamp. Mother of the Year here. Yep. We were swimming at 3:17 in the morning. And so what I suspect, thinking back to kind of the earlier days of digital cameras, the digital cameras would default to adding a time, not usually a timestamp, but apparently this camera did, but at least a date stamp. But then that got annoying to always have date stamps on your pictures. So I would turn it off. Excuse me, need to get a drink here. So I would turn it off. But it appears to me, because only one of the pictures had this timestamp, I was I just stood there stunned. I was just that vacation wasn't in June. That vacation was in July. And I will share more about why why this was so stunning, especially because I literally discovered this the week following the Dateline episode. Excuse me. I wasn't that shocked. I just haven't been drinking enough. So I thought to myself, okay, all right, well, then this vacation was late July. And what I think happened was that I probably noticed, I took the first picture, I probably checked to make sure that it didn't have the date stamp, and then turned it off. Because, like I said, you just have to take my word for it. There were pictures from the vacation on Dateline, but I went through, all of the pictures just to see, like, because I was trying to figure out, like, well, what was the end point? Because it would make sense that this would have been the first picture. So our vacation, most likely, we probably got there on like the 19th. Who knows, the time might have been off, maybe 19th, 20th, something like that. But I suspect we probably got in late on the 19th because I went after work and excuse me. And then probably, I do remember it was a week-long vacation. So we would have finished up maybe like the 26th, 27th, something like that, I'm estimating. So, but I already had a timeline in my mind, but to refresh anyone's memory who's not familiar with it, this was brought up in the Dateline episode, that it was noted on August 1st. So this was July 20th. We would have been gone by, maybe the 26th, 27th, as I mentioned. August 1st. So this is the following week. Lori is meeting with a therapist. Now, this is a therapist who is evaluating the risk levels of this family, and she is weighing in on whether Joe's visitation with Tylee should be reinstated. He went through a 12-month period where he couldn't see Tylee, and it's even noted in these court records that Tylee didn't know who her dad was. In one of the meetings, one of the sessions, someone asked Tylee if she knew who Joe Ryan was, and she said, he was my old daddy. Charles is my new daddy. So these 12 months, I mean, this is just like a detail in a YouTube live. I mean, for him, that had to have been, just absolutely devastating. But what this tells me is that we were on this vacation. So she, I believe, specifically planned this vacation with her ex-husband's sister. I totally believe, knowing full well what was going to happen just days later on August 5th. So just 4 days after she had said death would be an option. I should read that as well. Mrs. Vallow is a devout Mormon who has mentioned to me that death would be an option before giving Tylee to her father, Mr. Joseph Ryan, even for a visit. These are real and serious concerns. So she comes back from this amazing vacation, is so confident that she's like, actually tells a therapist death would be an option. And then 4 days later, Joe was assaulted by her brother, Alex Cox. I actually wonder, I will be very curious, during the trial, just to see, as all of these different events were happening, I will be very curious to see where Lori was, because Lori's MO is, she doesn't get her hands dirty. Everyone else gets their hands dirty, and she gets dirt on people, and that's kind of how she controls them. But in this case, I wonder if one was the original plan for Alex to actually murder Joe while we were on this vacation. Or alternatively, was the plan always to murder him after this visit? But then did she think, because she had just invited my kids and me to this amazing vacation, that I would somehow feel beholden to her and I wouldn't push for justice? In Lori's mind, everyone is a pawn. She will act like you are the most special person in the room. She wants to know all this information about your life, but she is gathering information for her own use. And I believe in her mind, this just would have been the absolute ultimate, for Joe, quite possibly to actually be murdered when we were on this vacation, but at minimum, right after it. So, okay, where are the files and albums? I've been beating this drum for a long time. I've talked about how when I was there, Lori, we went into her garage. This was this huge 3-car garage. And to the far end of the garage, there wasn't a car there. And there were 2 boxes. One box had the photo albums, like our photo albums from childhood. There were, mostly from like before we went into foster care. So there were a lot more pictures of Joe than we were the bookends. He was the oldest, I was the youngest. But there was this somewhat large box of photo albums. And then there was another box that just had all these files. And so Lori had told me that the police let her and Tylee in, and that she walked out with these albums and these files that she had said were lined up along the window of, or the wall, the wall in Joe's bedroom. And so when I got these pictures initially, I scoured them to see any evidence that there were photo albums or these files, because it was very apparent that they were in his apartment while he was deceased, because they reeked. I mean, I had never smelled dead body, but when you smell it, you recognize the smell. I mean, it was really pungent, very strong. So there is the chance that they could have been in the garage. That's why it's really disappointing that there weren't pictures of the garage. However, I question that, just given the strength of the odor. Maybe it could have seeped into the garage. I don't know, but there still wouldn't be an explanation for Lori specifically told me that Joe had all of these files lined up along the wall in his bedroom, and wondered if he went through the files like when he was in bed or something like that. And so I never want people to, as I mentioned earlier, I don't want people to just take my word for stuff. Like there have been a lot of outrageous claims throughout this case, and not just by Lori and Chad. I mean, like in the Facebook groups and stuff like that. So if I ever have the opportunity to actually show proof, I try to do that. It makes me feel better, and I just figured, well, there are some things that like either you believe me or you don't, like the coaster thing. But even the coaster thing, I mean, that was just tonight. I saw that, the coaster with the water bottle. But so that requires like a little less having to believe me. But so what I did was I went back to my text exchanges while I was going through these albums. So Lori had asked me to go through these albums. You can see the date and time stamps. And I was, so what she wanted me to do was go through them and write notes for Tylee of who all these people were. So her explanation was that she wanted Tylee to be able to like connect with the Ryan family. Not, like I'm not really sentimental with stuff like that to begin with. And I was never really that tethered to the Ryan family. Like I love my family, but but then just from what I saw of Tylee and the fact that these albums stunk so badly. Like Lori brought them into the dining room, put the box on the dining room table. And now I look back and I'm like, was she getting off on, just watching me struggle just to be in the same room with this smell? But she, it was in, now that I look back, it was definitely within her personality to just not care, and like not take into consideration, you know what, I'm asking the sister of the man whose decomposed body added scent to this box, like maybe this is too much to ask, and so I kind of like gravitate toward the opposite extreme. Like if I ask someone to do something, I'm like, it's totally is MBD if you can't do it, blah 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 blah, but anyway, but Lori, her shtick was, I really want Tylee to have this. And in fact, at one point she even told me like, oh, she just looks so much like you. I never saw it. I mean, she really looks like Lori's side of the family in my mind. But even at the time, I was just like, is she just like, trying to like appeal to me to like make me feel like, no, this is a really important mission. But in my mind, I was like, Tylee is never going to open up this box because this is nasty. Like, this is disgusting. If you want Tylee to have the pictures, then you pull them out of these albums and digitize them, or give them to me. I was willing to pull them out of the albums and digitize them, but she didn't want that. She wanted the notes in the album so that Tylee could go through the album. So it doesn't really matter so much, like I'm not going to read all of this. These were text exchanges with one of my brothers who is alive, and he is very, very private. So that's why I blurred out the name. I did explain here. Now there was one detail that was very surprising, which I will get to. But I started here because there was a date and timestamp. And I said, yeah, she's known for a couple weeks. It was actually longer than a couple weeks. And also one thing to keep in mind here, because even when I read back over these texts, I'm like, man, because I had just found out that he had passed. Like, she had just called me back. But my tendency is I get so like caught up in my head. It is hours, if not at least like 24 hours before I really process something that's like really significant like this. So I read over these texts, and I mean, this is just who I am. This is how I process, but it seems like kind of casual. And also I noted that like I didn't pick up on something that I probably should have picked up on. But anyway, but I said, she called me back at 1:30. He's already been buried / cremated. She didn't know which one it was, according to the police. And the police just put down the date he was found as the date of his death. But he had been dead, they think, for at least a couple weeks. And this is true. I forgot about this piece. I had changed my number because I was ditching AT&T, and they wouldn't let me take my number with me. But she, I can tell in this first text, I'm like, oh, well, I just believed her. She tried to call me, but I changed my number last year. Like, it wasn't, at some point later that day, I was just like, wait, we've had so many email exchanges, and my brother died. Like, sure, it is slightly inconvenient, but like if the person changed their number, like she still could have reached out to me over email. So to just go weeks, and it was more than a couple weeks, it was grossly inexcusable. Let me see. She and Tylee went to his apartment 2 weeks ago. I just found found these texts right before the live, just because I had been relying on the search feature in the Messages app, which leaves a lot to be desired. So I was just curious about something. I was curious if I had all the family pictures that I had taken, because you'll see that I took pictures of different people, and I'm like, who this, who that, because I don't know who these people are. And I also just wanted to make sure I saw all the exchanges, and I had not, because I never saw this when I went back on my laptop. So it says she and Tylee went to his apartment 2 weeks ago. So this was on May 12th. So 2 weeks prior, that would have been the end of April. But we know that police called her on April 13th. Yeah. The police got a hold of her. The police told her that the state took care of the body. They had no other details. And then this was something that she had told me, and I just passed this on to my brother as if it was fact, not really thinking it through. But I said they hadn't even removed the mattress, which was soaked with blood. The apartment reeked of death, and I was probably using Siri, corrected that. Oh, yeah, Siri. And then I think it might have missed a couple calls. He's an Android. I mean, a couple texts because there's like this jump. But I said, and I talked with Tom. I give him Lori's number. If you want to pass it on, her last name is Vallow. I'm pretty sure they're because that's such a jump. It looks like there might be something missing. But this detail here, I had not remembered that. I remembered it as they had, like the police had told her that the mattress was soaked with blood. But what she had actually said was that when she and Tylee went in, so this would have been the end of April, they hadn't removed the mattress. Now, why would they go in and remove everything else? Well, no, I guess what she's saying here is they hadn't removed anything because she said that's when police let them in, and that's when she got the photo album. So this right here, if for no other reason, this is something that clearly Phoenix police can verify or not, and they can, they can get copies of the text messages if they have any question about the veracity of them. These were text messages between my brother and me. Okay, and then he asked how Tylee was doing emotionally. Send her my love and condolences, please. I said, Lori said she's kind of all over the map, but she rarely wants to talk about it. We didn't talk about it at all last night. Lori had told me that Tylee rarely wants to talk about her dad. So early on, I remember thinking, why am I here to be a support to Tylee? I was happy to reconnect with Tylee. That wasn't an issue. But I was brought out under the pretense of being a support to Tylee because Tylee was having a really hard time. And then this is the evidence that I have that I didn't make it long because there was one picture of all 5 of us kids, and we only have like maybe 1 or 2, and she wouldn't let me have the picture. And so between that and the smell, I was like, I'm done. I'm done. So I only made it like a few pages. But this is just me asking, like, who are these people? So I could write them down in this ridiculous, stinky photo album. But here I actually say, yeah, Lori wants me to go through them and document who different people are for Tylee, but I don't know who half these people are. And I make the point, Tom was more connected with extended family than us. I didn't blur his name because he passed. And so, this is just more questions about that. And then I sent him the notes that Lori had copied down. And then these were my exchanges with my brother, Tom. And, again, just to verify, this was May 16th. He asked how I am. I say, I'm good. I'm in Arizona with Lori. He asked about Tylee. I say, I don't know. I just got in last night. So I actually have the dates that I was there in a calendar. But apparently it was the 15th. And I said, I don't... okay, I just got in last night and we kept it light. And I make the point to him, it's weird to be here and no one is sad. He's gone. It's sad he died alone, but no one misses him. And I've shared this before, but I actually sent him a message over Messenger. It was my first attempt to connect with him. That was March 27th, and let him know that our mother had passed. She had actually passed years before, but she was homeless and living. She had been homeless for years, so she was in the wind. And I would somewhat regularly, do a background check for her. And one of the times I pulled it up and it just said in giant red letters, deceased. So I had sent him a message letting him know. But according to the ME report, he was already dead, waiting to be found. So, if I had gotten it in maybe a week before or something, I mean, you can torture yourself with that woulda, coulda, shoulda. But I think that's about it. It's just like just to provide the proof. Yes, there were photo albums. I was looking at pictures of people who I had no idea who they were. Okay, now I am going to talk about something that's so tangentially related, little bit off topic. I try as much as possible not to, if you've been following the case for a while, you're familiar with that. I don't always win friends and influence people. I've amassed a number of trolls. And one of them was a family member. I've never met this person. She was never there, on our big annual visits with our dad, and at least not where I was, but I was also much younger than the rest of them. And anyway, so she enjoyed, I don't want to give her too much airtime because, her allegations against me, I mean, they're tired. Most of them are things that I've already said. I wasn't close to Joe, I've been really, really transparent. But someone had passed on some comments that she made with some of her Yaya sisters about, the typical kind of I'm not real family. And, just to let people know, if you're a troll listening to this, you're going to have to try harder than that. Growing up in foster care, it's not like I haven't heard that one before. And then I was forced to be adopted by my foster parents. It was a horrible, horrible situation. How I was forced to be adopted by them. But then even my biological siblings were angry with me that I allowed myself to be adopted. I was 14. They were all grown. And my sister was like, you're not a Ryan anymore. So I was just like, well, I'm in no man's land because I don't belong anywhere. So whatever. The typical thing of I'm not real family because I didn't know Tylee well enough. I, cut off contact with Joe or whatever. But there was one thing that was said in that exchange that I actually do want to address, and with information. So one of the things that was said was that it was something to the effect, I couldn't find the screenshot, but it was something to the effect of, and we know something like how he felt about her. And, up until this kind of unusual incident that happened, not incident, that's not the right word. It was, well, I'll just say what happened. Up until about a month ago, I questioned that myself, but there's only so much you can do with that. We all made the best decisions we could with the information we had and where we were in the healing recovery process of our childhoods. And so, but I had an unusual event about a month ago. Someone who is involved with the investigation reached out to me and said that in the course of the investigation, they had discovered that my brother listed me as a beneficiary on his life insurance plan. It was a token amount. It was less than $10,000. But there had, for me, it was touching just because now, of course, there's always the possibility, there's the remote possibility he forgot he listed me. I don't really think for a guy who is as extremely detail oriented as Joe is, I don't think that that's possible. But also, I had this exchange with him. I think I was a young mom. I think it was when he came and visited my then husband and my kids, and that was an amazing, amazing visit. That was I think the year before he met Lori. But he had told me whenever it was and it was face to face. He had told me, "Hey, I just want you to know I made you a beneficiary on my life insurance policy because I just want you to be taken care of if anything happened to me." And it was just like a touching moment. But I also know that like Joe likes to be kind of a hero and stuff. I picked this picture because I just found it, and it was amazing. That's my daughter. That's adorable, Tylee, and that is just such an amazing picture of Joe. This really captures Joe's personality. Like, I think he's more in it to win it than even my daughter is. But thought I should explain that. That was part of our first family vacation with them. But our only family vacation with them. But so he told me this, and I just thought, oh, and I was like, oh, Joe, that's so sweet. But it seemed really unusual, sweet but unusual. But I just kind of tucked it away, and then he got married, and it certainly wasn't something that was like front of my thoughts, But when this person called me and this person explained, this person's in law enforcement. This is not the person who did this is absolutely amazing for even doing this, because I wouldn't have ever known when they sent the letter to me. I thought maybe it was an old address. It wasn't. It was my current address. And the woman said to me, people just think it's junk mail. And I was like, I'm sure that's it. But in my mind, and I'm not trying to be cloying. I'm not trying to give this live like a Hallmark ending. In my mind, I just think for as high as the learning curve was for us figuring out this family thing, having had so little contact with each other over our childhoods, I never anticipated that, especially after our years of estrangement, that he would have still felt compelled to make good on that promise. I wouldn't have even thought of it as a promise. Like, it was so far outside the realm of possibility. And it does make me wonder, when I did have the one talk with it was Detective Johnny Meyer with PPD. I asked about his life insurance policy, and I was because I was like, are you at least investigating or participating in the investigation? Because I just thought for sure, like, that life insurance policy had to be in Tylee's name. And among all of the people I've talked to, there's a handful of people, because there are issues with the policy, because I don't know his social security number, and there's an issue with the fact that, like, my birth certificate no longer says Ryan because I was adopted. So they're trying to figure that out. So who knows? I might be, caught in endless red tape. But in the end, I'm sure, I certainly never anticipated that he would include me in his life insurance policy. But I'm sure also he probably never anticipated that I would be the one going to bat for him. And I don't mean that in any kind of self-aggrandizing way. But I was thinking a lot about this today as I was preparing, just kind of mentally right before the live. And I was just like, if that's not family, I don't know what it is, and so I think it's the best that we could do with, the cards we were handed, and not, excusing anything I did. I mean, if I had known then what I knew now, even before all of this happened, if I had just read The Body Keeps the Score or had gone through therapy, I'd never gone through therapy myself, I would have handled, that breakdown much differently. But I didn't, and we can't do that. I mean, there's nowhere to go with that, except deep into a hole. But anyway, so I just kind of want to make this statement because it is something that has come up again and again. I mean, it's definitely one of the favorite banners for the trolls to kind of hold. And I wasn't going to say anything. I certainly didn't want it to be, I didn't want it to ever come across like, yeah, F you, but so I don't mean it that way at all. But I think especially after, seeing those exchanges, I just thought, yeah, you might think that how he felt about me. And who knows, I might be looking too much into this. But I think at the end of the day, if the tables were turned, and I'm not just saying this for another Hallmark moment, there's no question in my mind Joe would do the same for me. So anyway, that concludes the live. I guess we will find out if my camera works. I promise you it did before. And if I knew it wasn't going to work, I wouldn't have done my hair. Okay, let's see here. Oops. Oh, I'm in the wrong. Nope. Okay, you know what? I am going to, yeah, because I'm definitely not on here. Oh, I'm in here twice. Huh. Yeah, I don't know why this is happening. I'm going to really quickly try to invite myself. We just using another instance and see if I can pull it up because I don't want to end the broadcast. But let's see here. Yeah, this is a brand new computer. I thought, oh, perfect. It'll be more powerful. I'll use it. Okay, let's see if this works. If not, I am still going to do Q&A. I am finished with the live itself. If you want to hang around, if you have questions, I always say, really the best approach is to put the questions in all caps. Normally, I'm not a big fan of writing the all caps, but it does help it to kind of stand out. Also, tagging analytics can also help it to stand out. But yeah, we're just going to spend the time. Whether I figure out the camera issue or not, I'm just going to spend the rest of the time with any questions people might have. And let's see if I can get this to work. Okay. I think this might work. We will see. Kind of bummed because my new screen is so big. I didn't have to wear glasses. Didn't have to wear glasses. Okay. Is there an echo? Is the echo gone? I know that there's a bit of a delay. Okay. Is the echo still there? Echo better, but still some. Okay. I'm just going to start removing all, oops. Okay, how about that? Lives used to be so much easier when they were part of YouTube. Now we have to use these third-party tools. So, okay, is the echo gone now? It should be, because all of my alternate personalities are gone. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. All right. So, perfect. Don't touch it. Okay. That's funny. Okay. All right. I am going to scan for any questions. And I'm going to open up my window. Okay. Okay, have you checked with the VA regarding Joe's life insurance? No. I don't think that this was through the VA. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, I don't even know how that would work or how I would find that out. Yeah. Yeah. I'll do some checking on that. Thank you, Arrow Doe. She just had a nice comment. Okay. Lots of comments about echoes. Oh, yeah. There's some advice about how to handle StreamYard that I just now saw. Okay, so far, okay. I saw something in all caps. I saw a pic of a fabulous gray house, rectangular. Did Joe build that? Lori disappointed she didn't get to be the princess of that house. Yes, so I don't know how much Joe participated, the way he talked about it. So the first time I went to Austin, they were building that house, and I actually have pictures of the house like under construction, because quite a bit of it was done. But he was so proud of that house, and he worked with the builders, and like I had never heard of like decorating cement floors. It sounds kind of crazy to have a cement floor, but like they had this floor had these beautiful medallions and stuff. I was kind of like, oh, good luck when Tylee falls on that cement. But it was absolutely beautiful. And but yeah. So I was there when it was being built, and then my family stayed there after it was finished, and it was absolutely gorgeous. If he's a veteran, he should not have needed other health insurance either. So now I have wondered about that. I don't know that much about VA benefits. He was in the Navy for 4 years, so he wasn't like career. But with this particular plan, you could also use it as a supplement. So given the fact, now it did seem weird that like there were these papers all over the place, but that it did seem like he was probably looking to get some kind of extra help with his back. one of my daughters was in the Navy, and they're not particularly amazing at providing timely care. Okay. Hi, Annie. Have you heard any gossip? Oh boy, about how the defendants are doing in the clink? I wish. I get the same gossip that other people do, but I really think, like, earlier on, I heard more details, but then I think someone put the fear of God in all these workers and we're like, stop. Now, I was a vault. I didn't ever share any of the information in lives or, anything like that. But they would make their way into all the groups. But you also have to kind of be careful with some of the gossip because the people who would actually know aren't allowed to talk about it. And I did see a pattern when I was in the groups of people being, I liken it to like emotional arsons, like they would, and sometimes it was the same people. They would say, hey, I heard in another group, and then make a really outrageous claim. So no like backup or, like no anything, no validation. And these rumors would just spread like wildfire. At one point, I had a post about, because before I was an analyst, I used to be a reporter. And so I was just like, okay, do you guys understand the meaning of allegedly and reportedly? And, and so people would read something and then they would repeat it as fact. Like they might take it to another group. And so I think that they like the feeling of being in the know, and they would state things as fact that were clearly not fact. It could even be disproved, and I could disprove things pretty easily because I had this dashboard that's searchable, So just recently, someone left this, like, it wasn't a scathing comment on my YouTube, but it was very much like, they tried to get Melanie Gibb to lie for them, but she refused. And I was like, false. Everyone believed that for months. But I was able to look it up in the dashboard and send them the link to that minute mark where Pryor was grilling her on, so what you're saying is you lied. But anyway, okay. God bless you for standing not only for your brother, but Tylee, JJ, Charles, and Tammy. You are an inspiration. Thank you. Thank you. That's very nice. Oh, and U.S. Navy. Yeah. And you're a ghost. Cool. But no, that's very kind. Honestly, I wish I could advocate for Tammy more. I have wherever it's been possible. Like I really took issue with the fact that, here you had people disappearing, and this group was still talking about Tammy and Melanie Gibbs, saying, I knew it was part of the plan. I didn't know how they were going to do it. And I'm like, how many people had to go missing? For like, in my mind, Tammy could have been saved. If you were at all in doubt about, okay, all right, yeah, Charles, I thought we were just going to murder him with prayer, but all right, and then Tylee, she's gone, and and it's like person after person. But then, like it really frustrates me that like Tammy, by then, like it should have been really clear. Okay, no, this is, now we're identifying a new zombie. And we're even saying, like, we're justifying it. She would be okay with it. It's her mission, and anyway. So I wish I could advocate for Tammy more. I just didn't know her, but I hope to be able to meet her sister one day, because she was just absolutely lovely on Dateline. And it was so good to hear from people from Tammy's family. How old were you when you went into foster care? I asked because I'm a foster mom. Oh, and I adopted 4 kids through foster care. That is awesome. So, excuse me, I was 2 months old. So back then, so my mother, she had really significant mental illness, and she was never going to get custody of me. And she abducted me when I was probably 4, and then again when I was 9. But back then, they did not sever parental rights, and so there were actually family members who wanted to adopt me, but my dad had said, you either take all 5 of them or none of them. Excuse me. So I think he just wanted, like all the family was in one area, a really close area. Not all the family, but a lot of family. He lived in this city outside of New York City called Bayonne, and the family members who wanted to adopt me, there were 2 different family members, and they lived in the area. So I think it would have been like a reminder, where he really wanted us like out of the picture because he just wanted to focus on AA. So we were like taken to South Jersey and divided up. And so, ultimately we were in different homes anyway, except for 2 of my brothers, the ones who hated each other. Thank you, Jean Marie. That's very sweet. And Braylon's awesome. Good job. We definitely need more good foster parents. So we adopted our son from foster care. Okay. I already read that one. Let me see if there are any more recent. Only let me, I think I missed something. Okay. I am thinking that Zulema, the creepy healer. Wait, maybe I can see it on the bigger screen, but just use this one for sound. I can. I'm going to do that. Okay. And I lost the question. I agree that not only Tammy, but all of these people could have been saved had the police done their jobs. Oh my gosh. Yes. It's ridiculous. This could have been stopped when they were in Arizona. It should have been stopped when they were in Arizona. I do hold Gabe Bonilla partially responsible. Like, he was a really key person who, had he just been more honest and proactive, I think he could have been the one to prevent all of the deaths, except for my brothers, if my brother was indeed murdered. And one thing I didn't touch on in the live, which I should have, because I've talked about it in other interviews, but I really try not to operate under the assumption that people have watched all of these different shows. Just even the fact that Lori had me come out in 2018, because clearly Tylee wasn't struggling. I don't regret going out there, because I am so glad I got to reconnect with Tylee. But she wasn't struggling, and even if she had been internally, she knew, like, you don't express that in front of Lori, because even if my eyes missed it or something, she would immediately go into campaigning mode. And so I do question why she even had me come out. Like, to me, I just think, like, yeah, I think she wanted to know what, if I was suspicious at all. And I wasn't. But I was put off. I was disgusted by the constant campaigning. I definitely didn't. I just tried to keep the peace as much as possible. And but I've showed the text exchange I had with one of my daughters, where I said, I think Lolo might be a sociopath. Anyway, but yeah, I think the whole purpose of that trip was just to see if I was suspicious. And and she also told me that, like, that someone from the ME's office kept calling her and leaving messages for her, and and she was like, I don't want to talk to them, and that obviously rubbed me the wrong way, because I'm like, okay, you might have hated this guy, but he was still a human being. He still had family, and like there wasn't even an obituary put out for him. It was radio silence. And because I wasn't Facebook friends with him, I had no way to even get a message to his friends, that Joe had passed. And but to not even to just let all these calls go to voicemail, and to even express irritation that they kept calling her, but then she ordered a copy of the autopsy, because she texted me later, and like after I had gotten back, and said, I have a copy of the autopsy. Would you like it? And so she just scanned it or took pictures of it and sent it to me. So I'm like, well, if you didn't care about this guy enough that you wouldn't even return their calls, why order a copy of the autopsy? Why would you care what the findings were? You didn't care about this person. So there's just so much a sketch. Okay. Okay, let's see if I can find any more questions. Okay. And thank you guys for putting your questions in all caps. If it's not in all caps, I do actually go back and read the comments. There have been a couple of lives where I didn't realize this, if there were technical issues, and so I trimmed off the blank times, and if you even trim, if you change the video in any way, YouTube takes away all of your comments, but I didn't realize that. I thought it was a technical issue. But yeah, but when I do have the comments, I actually go through and read them all. Okay. Did Lori go there to drink wine and make ketchup sandwiches while admiring his body? Maybe she opened the window to admire the trophy. Yeah, I don't really. I mean, she actually didn't drink alcohol, but yeah, I doubt she was admiring anything. Is the DA in Rexburg keeping you in the loop in terms of how the case is going? Yes. They are absolutely wonderful. For all the angst I have toward all things Arizona law enforcement, I've said this consistently. Idaho should be schooling all of them. I have no complaints. They have really, really been amazing. So there's just not a whole lot to update. And I do I don't reach out to them regularly. Someone even asked me about that once, and I was like, well, what would you say? If I had questions, you would just say you can't share that. And he just kind of laughed, and he said, oh, yeah, that's true. And so I was like, I trust you to do your jobs. I don't need to call in and check, oh, hey, are you guys still doing your jobs? So anyway, but they're wonderful when we do touch base. And one of the officers with Rexburg Police Department actually asked me if I would call. I forget, he gave me some kind of schedule. He was like, would you mind just calling in just so that I don't forget to call you and give you updates? And so that was very sweet. It's just so the opposite of what I've experienced with Phoenix. Okay. Scanning. Lori had you come out to appear as a caring parent to Tylee to avoid suspicion. Yeah, I mean, she had to know. Eventually, we were going to find out that Joe had died. So, yeah, it's, I mean, even if like weeks had passed, because, you know, she couldn't have known that I sent him that message over Messenger, you know, and no, you could have someone who doesn't know to check, because we weren't friends on Facebook. Well, you know, you could have someone who doesn't know to check, you know, like their other folder, but Joe was very tech savvy. So yeah, so eventually I just, yeah, I would have been suspicious. Okay, let me see. Question. What is a good takeaway from this tragedy? What can we say as a society do differently? Oh boy, that is the question of the hour. You know, I don't want to try to like wax too eloquent, and people do get really upset when I address the white privilege. I don't know why white people get upset about that. Like they're, yeah, especially when you're dealing with wealthy white people. I do think that white privilege. I do think that there is an undercurrent in this entire case of, you know, the rules never applying to Lori. Like everyone just bent the rules, and maybe not every single time, but like even in like when Joe did have shared custody of Tylee, like there was this one incident where he was supposed to have Tylee for the month of July. And Lori asked him to pick Tylee up at this concert. And these are all in these court documents that Justin Lum passed on to me. In fact, if someone could remind me, I'll put those in the group because they're not out there circulating. And he has just been the king of, like, you know, ordering documents. He's really been amazing. But in this document, Joe was supposed to pick her up at their like prescribed location, and Lori asked if he would wait until after Tylee's concert. Tylee had a concert that night, and Joe agreed, and he went to the concert. And afterwards, he was looking for her, and he couldn't find her. And so he thought, oh, you know, Lori's pulling a fast one. So he went out to the parking lot to Lori's car and waited out there thinking, you know, he was going to intercept her. And she had outsmarted him and had someone pick her and Tylee up. And both her car and I think Charles' car were in the parking lot. So, you know, Joe was just standing in the parking lot thinking like they have to come eventually, and they didn't come. And when he reported, he was living in Gilbert. So there were multiple instances, like they were on Gilbert's radar. And also there's a document, I probably should have shared it. I did share it in one of my lives. It is this document that was put out by Maricopa County. I forget the name of it. I'll have to look it up. But where they specifically address the importance of the different counties and the different law enforcement agencies working together in Maricopa County, because the recognition that a lot of times when there's, you know, domestic violence, you know, the abuser is able to kind of avoid detection because they move around within Maricopa County. And so this document, the entire purpose of this document is to express earnest in the importance of their responsibility to track instances of domestic violence. And in this document specifically focused on domestic violence within Maricopa County to prevent this. And all of these incidences happened in Maricopa County, so law enforcement was involved again and again. If they had just done like a background check, and they must have done a background check on Joe, because they found a family member. They sent a letter, and it went to a family member's ex-wife, and thankfully she passed it on, and that's how we found out. But if they had done a background check, like, it's a database, I'm an analyst, like I live with databases, and so like it's as simple as querying the person's social security number. They would have pulled up all of this backstory, so even if they thought, well, this looks a little open and shut, like he's a little bit overweight, he has this history, but if they had just pulled up and that family history, and then checked it against the fact that like Lori wasn't returning calls and things like that, like with I believe it was the ME's office, it told a story. I really don't think that they did their due diligence, and I don't think I'm being unfair. Like there was a lot that was documented. So I think as a society we need better protocols and a better system in place to address the unique challenges of basically a femme fatale. I don't think the system does a really good job at doing that. I mean, until Lori crossed the line into Idaho was like, no one's charmed. And so, but like if you hear law enforcement with Lori in any of these videos, they're practically like, Pepe Le Pew. I realize, he's on the out now, but I mean, they just seem to be like almost like smitten little boys. But even with that incident, so Joe did not get Tylee, because someone from Gilbert Police Department said that they couldn't enforce the custody agreement because Joe didn't meet at the agreed location. So because Joe accommodated Lori and went to Tylee's concert and tried to keep the peace, Gilbert was like, well, you know what? You didn't follow protocol. So sorry about July, because he was supposed to have her for the entire month. And so, so he actually expressed frustration in a follow-up document that because he found out the case had been closed. And so they were like, oh, that must have been an accident, like a bookkeeping error or something like that, And so, again and again, there were just all of these exceptions made for Lori. And so I think there's something in that, I mean, I'm not a Pollyanna, so it takes a long time to redirect a ship, and people with money and beauty and power have, I mean, they've, with probably pretty rare exception, they've always fared better. But get off my soapbox. Maybe Lori just thought you'd buddy up with Tylee, so Tylee would just leave her alone. Yeah, I don't know. But I did find out from, I think I started to say this and forgot, from one of the people I had talked to about Joe's policy, someone had slipped. I won't say exactly what this person said, but it became apparent that Lori was the beneficiary, not Tylee. And so when I heard that, she was the beneficiary for the majority of the policy. When I heard that, I just thought, okay, that I did not think that would have been something Joe would have done. I would have thought like he would have had a trust account for Tylee. But yeah, I mean, who knows if he even had the resources to set something like that up. But yeah, so I mean, clearly this money would have been intended for Tylee, but it was in Lori's name. And so I can't say that 100%. I haven't seen the copy of the policy. I don't know that I would ever see that, like the breakdown of who gets what. But the person did catch themselves. But I thought, oh, now they would have been arm wrestling for that, because, you know, Tylee wasn't a wilted flower. She would have taken issue with Lori spending her money. And I do know from one person I talked to completely off the record that they were, like, the family was living off of that money, according to this person who was very closely involved. So, you know, that could have, I mean, there was already, I've addressed this before, there was already tension between Tylee and Lori, while at the same time, like, I know, like, I've looked at her Instagram, and there was this, like, really darling picture of her with Lori. I think it was like for Mother's Day, or it might have been Lori's birthday, but like Tylee said something about, you know, how lucky she was to, you know, get to have her as a mama. And, you know, so it's like, I think, you know, even Tylee was conflicted. But, you know, so there definitely were lots of moments of, like, tenderness and us laughing. So it's not like it was just, you know, 24/7 horrible. It was, like, mostly good. And, you know, we went and did fun things and things like that. But then, you know, the disturbing moments were very disturbing. Okay, someone gave me numbers for VA. Thank you. Thank you. I will look those up. I agree with you. Okay. Thank you. Navy, Gray Ghost. Okay. Any other questions? The notebook. Okay. The notebook on the travel pillow is a tablet. Look closely at the sides, short flap inside for standing it up. Whose was it? Yeah, I don't know. Wow, that's amazing. I'm going to look back at those pictures. And this is exactly why I want to get the pictures out there. Like, I don't want the media picking up on these. I mean, it's been hard enough, like, especially after that one Dateline, like, Joe was just absolutely crucified in some of these groups. And so I just don't want this stuff out in the media. If the media orders the pictures and they put it out there, you know, so be it. But I don't. Yeah. But I am very eager to get these pictures in the hands of really smart, incisive people. Like, oh, and am I pronouncing your name right? Well, I actually won't see your name. I think it's Owen, but I don't think I've ever heard it. I feel like Marge Simpson. I've only seen it in writing. Anyway, but thank you for that tip. I'm definitely going to check it out. Okay. You can tell I hate wearing glasses. Okay, I wonder, did Alex really die a natural death? And if not, who killed him? Yeah. That would be remarkable. I mean, you know, I think it's in a lot of ways very similar to Joe's situation. It is possible. You know, it's possible that Joe, Tammy, and Alex just all died natural deaths, you know. But yeah, I tend to be a little more on the side of where there's smoke, there's fire, you know. And so, and then there's the recording of, I didn't bring it up in this one because I've already covered it and it's been covered quite a bit, but you know, there's the recording of Lori saying she wanted to murder Joe. Yeah, and she never even like circled back and said, oh, but you know, like she never told this group that he was dead, you know. Like, oh, but God took care of it, you know. We just, you know, prayed and God murdered him. But I mean, there was just nothing. It was just, either give me a temple recommend or I'm going to murder him. And to me, that is very much in keeping with Lori's MO of like, okay, it's been 6 months now. I think about 6 months. I got away with it. And so now it's just, like to me, it's no different from Lori taking pictures of Tylee and JJ within 24 hours of them being murdered. Like, I just think they're like trophies, and they caught hiding in plain sight. Like a lot of serial killers will do that. They'll talk about their murder, but they'll talk about it in kind of code because it's exciting for them. Like they're talking about something like shooting a raccoon when they really mean, they murdered a young girl. And, and Tammy was like, whatever, one of us is working, go away. But yeah, so yeah, it's too much to ask. It's too much in her MO to, okay, you've assisted, like some people like Joe and Tammy, they were always in the way of the mission. And with Joe, I know from a friend of Charles who talked to me completely off the record that they received the money from Joe's policy somewhere around October, November 2018, because there was an issue. He didn't know what the issue was, but he wondered if it was that the policy listed Tylee as a beneficiary. Now, I feel reasonably confident that wasn't it, but so there was some kind of issue, because he said that usually life insurance companies are really good at paying out. So he said for it to have been that long, and Charles had asked him to, like, he had a friend who worked at that company, if he could like kind of expedite things. So, so that money would have come October, November, somewhere in there, 2018. And then we see how the timeline picks up in October, November between Lori and Chad. He identifies her family members as light or dark. He stays there. And then, it just becomes one thing after another. And then finally it's like, okay, well, I give Charles a light rating because he let me stay in his home, but now I want his wife. So he, bounced over to the dark side. So now we can justify having him murdered. But then, even with Alex, like here, he had been doing her dirty work for years, but, then he is a liability. So, and that whole, like all of those, the body cam, the footage of, like Zalema and stuff, like it's too sketch. Like there are just too many things. Like your son was living with you, I think, but he didn't know that you were married to this guy, and this guy actually, took your last name. And then Zalema is like, hey, you police, I want you out of my house. Like, if my loved one died, I'd be like, you're not leaving for lunch. No, you can order in. Like, I want you to collect everything. And, you can just imagine I'd be like there with a magnifying glass, hey, do you need the towel? Do you need this? So that just is so counterintuitive to someone who wants to know how their new husband died. So yeah, no. Okay. Aw, thank you, Ridgeback Jima. She said, you can be real family with us. I actually, it's kind of funny. Because for so many years, like I just struggled with this whole concept of family, because I was so much younger than my siblings. And then, they aged out and they were gone. They were in the wind. I saw them only a couple times. And so the majority of like the years that I remember, they weren't around, but then when I became an adult, then like everyone wanted a relationship with me. But, like we all grew up in foster care, like there was so much drama. I mean, non-stop drama. So I was just kind of, and I was in college and stuff. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what did I get myself into? So, yeah, the one, well, I have many criticisms. No, like no one is as harsh of a critic of me as I am, but like with the way I dealt with our whole passes, whereas Joe was an exploder and, just like put it all out there, I always had one foot out the back door. And, ultimately that's how that played out. But anyway, but I do believe that, like there are even friends that I've made through this case, they have become like family to me, and so yeah. So I do think there is that element that, because like, I was ultimately from a family of 7 and only 2 of us are alive. So, it's just weird. I agree that not only Tammy, but all of these people could. Oh, yeah, I already read that. Let me scroll to the most recent. Did Alex go back to kill Joe? I don't know. The reason all of a sudden I had a big echo. Hopefully that's it. Okay. Is there still? Okay. Is there still? I didn't do anything different, so I don't know why this is doing this. Oops. Are you guys hearing this? Yeah, you are. I don't know why it started again. Okay. I think. Okay. Okay, can you guys hear me? Hello? Okay, can you guys hear me? Hello? Okay. All right. That was actually a number of issues. I'm surprised it took as long as it did to start echoing. That was the result of this external microphone and having YouTube open on this laptop. Anyway, okay. Sorry about that, guys. This is why you don't do a live with a new computer, but it was so much more powerful. Okay, any other questions? Really sorry about the echo. Lots of, she's back. All right. Okay, watching both Melanies on TV made it so obvious. Do you believe they not only knew, but could have been involved? So that's a really good question. I don't know about them being involved. My impression is that I think to some degree, at least with, I think their motives were a little different. I think her niece, Melanie, has a very strong loyalty to Lori, and Lori works really hard to make that happen, you know, because she is continually like the victim who needs saving, you know, and she's like the sweet, you know, like, oh, why is everyone always turning against me, you know, kind of thing. And then also, I remember the first time I met Lori, her talking about Melanie and about being like a second mom to Melanie. And in fact, I only remember seeing Lori tear up twice. And one time was talking about her sister Stacy's death, and another time an incident she had that she said she had with her second husband, William LaGoya. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But I know that she really, really loved Melanie. And so I think Melanie, like my impression, I mean, her involvement in terms of just looking the other way and having zero interest in what what was going on with these kids is absolutely inexcusable. Her explanations for, oh, JJ was just always at therapy, and all of them love to say, oh yeah, Tylee was with friends, or, you know, Tylee was at BYU at, you know, 16, and, you know, all those crazy things I've already talked about. So, but I think Melanie is, and it's very much a Cox family tradition. Like, they circle the wagons. They are a very nuclear unit. Like, they are the opposite of the Ryan family. Like, we're just kind of all over the place, just trying to figure out how to adult, you know, and or at least when we were younger. But we, you know, we were like free electrons, very loosely circling, you know, a neutron. But with the Cox family, I mean, if someone is in trouble, you see it again and again with these court records. Like, they circle the wagons and they look after their own. And you don't just like divorce a Cox family member. Like that, the outsider is eviscerated. Like, they even released records of like things that Lori said about William LaGloria, and it's the same kind of thing. She's just like the perfect little mom, just trying to take care of her baby, and this guy is just no good. He has no moral compass. He's, you know, I mean, all these horrible things, and some of them might have been true, we don't know, but at this point, you know, she has not earned a single benefit of the doubt, you know. And so anyway, so Melanie is just kind of like, I'll say whatever, you know, whatever's most expedient, and Melanie, her niece, so whatever's expedient in the moment. And none of these players are particularly intelligent. So and again, I don't mean that to be mean, or, you know, like, I'm not calling them idiots. They're just not intelligent. Like, even the stuff they come up with, you know, like, you think like, oh, that's almost kind of like Mormon mafia, you know, like, oh, you had 60 burner phones. Oh, you kept the burner phones. Like, you know, like, that's not, I'm glad they did, you know, but they just weren't the sharpest tacks in the drawer. And Melanie Gibb, I get the impression that she was kind of living vicariously through Lori. And I addressed this in my live about her. But, you know, like, she's a pretty chill lady. But then when she talks about these victims, you know, like going missing and stuff, and I address it in the live, I mean, where most people would wilt, you know, talking about these really horrible things, you see moments of like, she just comes alive, you know, and that duping delight. So I get the impression, this is just my opinion, but I get the impression that Melanie was able to, well, okay, let me back up a little bit more. There was one weekend. So, you know, I'm always like carving out these timelines, always looking for associations and stuff. And I noticed that on one of the weekends, it was the first weekend in August of 2019. So, you know, and I think I addressed this in the live about Melanie, but, you know, like, Melanie was having one of her get-togethers, and Chad was there, and David was speaking. But then, you know, it's like, I just kind of like picture things, and I'm like, that was their first weekend as couples, you know, because Charles had just died. I mean, Melanie sent this, you know, this email out, and had, you know, well, it was originally going to be at Lori's, and, you know, and this was less than, I think it was like 4 days after she claims Lori told her that Charles had died, because she doesn't watch the news. Okay, whatever, Mel. But anyway, but very soon after Charles was murdered in that home, she was like, well, I mean, Lori's place is open. But, you know, when I saw, oh, it was in the court hearing for Chad, the preliminary hearing. That's when we found out that Chad was there. And so I was like, oh, this is their first little weekend as couples, And so I think, Melanie's trying to wax moral now, and in that recorded call, which I already addressed, I think was highly choreographed, but then got away from Melanie because Lori didn't agree to be scolded by her. But yeah, so, I think for Melanie, it was just like, hey, you know what? Whatever needs to happen, I'm not actually the one pointing the gun at someone and pulling the trigger or putting poison in something, or, who knows what they did to Tylee and JJ. It doesn't look like it's, yeah, anyway. But so it seems like Melanie was able to justify being Lori's right-hand man. And I think she had her eyes on this tent city that David had talked so much about. But anyway, so yeah, it's crazy. Okay. I do think that when the trial comes around, I mean, for us to know as much as we know, I think when the trial comes around and we actually, because well, let me back up. I know I do this a lot. I stop mid sentence. Sorry about that. But when Rob Wood was, presenting, he presented a lot of evidence, but this was only a preliminary hearing. He still got to play his cards pretty close to the vest, So I suspect when the trial comes around, it is going to be wild. I think we're going to be finding out, about so much more. Maybe not about Melanie Gibb because she's helping the prosecution. But okay. No, I'm reading about headphones, so I'm going to stick to, if you asked a question and I didn't get to it, I'm just in a pocket of have you tried this? Have you tried that? So I'm going to go to the most current. Was Lori's dad? Oh, and one of the tricky things too is I start reading it and then everything gets it bounces up. Was Lori's dad a life insurance salesman? It was something like that, like annuities or something like that. It's the same business Brandon is doing. Gibbs was probably nervous. Yeah. You can't explain all of that with nerves. Yeah, there was an infant sister, Laura, who died too. Okay. So loyal not to tell, but Gibb, her interview posing by a tree, children were murdered, and she was busy being a star. Both seem guilty. Yeah, no argument there. Okay, someone said, I think MG and DW knew the kids were dead and may have participated. They need lie detector tests. I floated this in my live about Melanie. I suspect might be too strong of a word, but I do question if JJ wasn't already dead when they went to look at the property. I mean, if you listen to Melanie and David Warwick's testimonies about Sunday, they could not be more evasive. Like, you asked them a question, it was almost like hearing Melanie Pawlowski in an interview, but it was just like, oh, like Pryor, I was kind of surprised Pryor let them off as easy as he did. I mean, like on some of the more pressing questions, I do think he's probably saving some for the trial, just like Rob Wood is. But yeah, their statements about Sunday, and then there is a glaring contradiction between Melanie and David as far as who went to the property. And I fall on the side of David. But, if David is right that Lori also went, I mean, I can't imagine a single scenario where Lori's like, no, that's okay. You guys go on without me. I'll just stay here, with my son. I mean, you're just going to look at property for our tent city that we've been talking about, consistently, but that's fine. I'm sure whatever you guys decide will be fine, and there's just no way. And so like, if they had quibbled over if Alex was there, then maybe, but Lori, no. And so if Lori was there, then now we have a problem, because who was with JJ? So I question. And then also we know that Sunday Lori took a picture of JJ sitting on the sofa, and I'm very curious to find out what time of day that picture was taken. So personally, I do not believe the whole story of Alex bringing in JJ and them thinking it was a tender moment and stuff like that. Because, again, they, in my opinion, they both showed signs of deception. Like, they were like, oh, the question was pretty straightforward. Did you see Alex bring JJ in? And it was just like, I turned my back, and I was like, and then, Melanie couldn't say if Alex, spent the night, and I shared Pryor's frustration. I mean, he's an odd bird. All I can see when I look at both of them is heat and snow miser. But yeah. So I don't like him. I don't think he's doing a particularly good job. But I did share his frustration on, like, what do you mean you don't know if Alex spent the night? Like, there were only 3 bedrooms, and you said that, you and David, or David said that they were in separate bedrooms. And so that would leave Alex in the living room. Like, this is pretty straightforward, so and also you also have to keep in mind, like, it's like when you find out that something traumatic happened around the time that you were involved. I mean, even just with like these vacations with, Lori and Charles and Joe and stuff, like, you rack your brain trying to remember and put things together and figure out the puzzle. So even people who are like, oh, I have a hard time remembering what I ate for breakfast. I'm like, how many 7-year-olds have gone missing, like, while you were staying in the home of the person? Like, they would have been reviewing, and Melanie and David would have been talking about it. So for, like, when Melanie was like, when Pryor asked her when she talked to the FBI, and she was like, I don't know, sometime in 2020. And, he went month by month. And I'm just like, no, that's one is not helpful, but also, what are you hiding? Like, I mean, if you can't answer some really basic questions, like, yes, no, did you see Alex come in with JJ, and about what time was it? Like, we shouldn't have to circle back around. Anyway, whatever. Okay. Yeah. Someone said Melanie P is guilty of sin, and her new man Ian should never sleep again. Yeah, I mean, Ian played he played a really interesting role. I actually think he's the most intelligent one of this whole group, because when he outlined, but he basically codified what this group believed, and his outline was pretty stellar. It was very organized and stuff. When I first saw it, I actually totally dismissed it. I was like, there's no way, like, people don't believe in zombies. Like, I just thought it was like a red herring. And then it was actually seeing Melanie in an interview And I picked up on resentment. Like she was, she was like sugarcoating it, but I was like, oh, there's some resentment there toward Ian for, writing out those notes, and or for going to the FBI and telling them about the beliefs in the group, and then, handing over the computer to his ex-wife. And so it was actually her resentment that made me like take a second look at the notes. I was like, this is insanity. I didn't even read all the way through it the first time. And I like built a word cloud around his notes. And if you don't know what a word cloud is, it's like every instance of a word causes the word to become that much bigger. And so if you have like a lot of text, as an analyst, it's a good way to see like predominant themes. And oh my gosh, it was it's lost because it was in TCU. I might have it somewhere, but it was really staggering. It was dark. Like the word dark was really big and evil and zombies and all this stuff. And then it was like children and like the things that are like kind of positive words, they were like so tiny compared to these really dark words. It was it was eye-opening. But when he said, I forget now what he said, but I think it was in the Dateline interview. He basically said this is much ado about nothing and a lot of hype. I think he used the word hype. I was furious. I was absolutely furious. I was just like, how dare you? But yeah, so he really didn't do himself any favors. Like he could have just kept out of it, but yeah, and even with like Summer and Janice, if they had just held out a few more weeks, because it was only a matter of weeks after they finally made their like media debut that the kids were found. If they had just held out, I think it was like 5 weeks or something, they would have had some plausible deniability. But instead, you have Janice saying, "Yeah, I talked to JJ in October. He knows us." Okay. Yeah, a hype about missing children, and they weren't even found at that point, and so yeah, and now obviously we know where the kids were, but as a family member and with all these like false sightings and people posting pictures they thought was Tylee, and the constant like theories about like, oh, well, hopefully she, like people would say, they wouldn't think about it. They just, they were like, what they were trying to say is hopefully she's alive, but it would come out as, oh, hopefully she's just in the sex trade, and she can get out. And I'm like, no, those two words don't go together, or, hopefully it doesn't go with sex trade. It just doesn't. But, so yeah, it was just like a constant drip. So, to be in that heightened state where, you're, and I was just like, digging through everything I could find, everyone deals with it differently. But so for him to use the word hype, that was not cool. Okay, take a few more questions. Yeah, Ian needs to run. Yeah, well, now he's kind of tethered. Not that they can't divorce with a baby, but yeah, that's going to be hard on the relationship. I don't know how any of these people will maintain relationships through all this. Yeah, Enlightened One, so am I. They said thankful for Ian in doing that. Yeah, and so am I. It was accidental, but yeah, I really applaud Ian's wife who found it, and send it off to Brandon. Patty Lee asked, do you think JJ was dead when Alex carried him through? I do, because the scenario that kind of makes the most sense to me makes the most sense in terms of like lines up is I think that quite possibly JJ was killed on Sunday before they went, and they may have kept his body in Alex's apartment. And there was always this, I'm always looking for signs of like people hiding in plain sight, and you see that with both, you see that with several of the players, Lori, Chad, big time Jason Mao, where they're like talking about things, but they're actually referencing something else. So there was one thing that Chad had said the day of the welfare check that, when he said it, it always stuck with me. In fact, I wrote a post. Anyone who was in TCU at the time, I wrote a lot of posts. But on this one, it really caught my attention that Chad, when asked when he had last seen JJ, here he was being so vague. He hardly knew Lori. No, he was married to her. He didn't have her number. Yeah, he did. They went on their honeymoon together. They were living together. So everything was like vague, which is a sign of deception. But also something that can be a sign of deception from my years of watching true crime is being unnecessarily specific. And so here he was like so vague, to a point of being clownish, because these people are not smart. They didn't think through like what their stories were going to be. And they certainly didn't sync up on a lot of them because, like the day of Charles' murder, like they were all over the place. And, Chandler was like, oh, I think we're done here, But the day of the welfare check, they asked Chad when he had last seen JJ, and he said that it was in October, so why? And that it was in apartment, I think, what was Alex's apartment? I thought I'd never forget. I think it was 207. I think so, but it was Alex's apartment. And so like I was like, okay, stop the record, like scratch, like wait, why is all of a sudden this clown being like so specific? It was October, and it was October, that makes sense because he was answering the question of when he last saw JJ, but now he's like being as specific as it was in Alex's apartment. And so we knew that Alex's apartment was vacant at the time of the welfare check, but they didn't have a heads up that a welfare check was coming. And so I was just like, what would Chad have been doing with JJ? JJ's not his child, and JJ wasn't medicated, and JJ was a handful. Even when he was medicated, he was adorable. This little boy, and I don't write Hallmark card greetings. He was so lovable. I just, the way I describe him is, imagine taking all your filters off. There's JJ. But for like, why would Chad why would he have had an occasion to be with JJ in apartment 107? And so that, to me, I flagged as I wondered if that was hiding in plain sight. And so when the hearing came around and there was this discrepancy between what Melanie Gibb had said and what David Warwick said, I went back to that apartment, in my mind. And so yeah, I do wonder if that really was. We don't know, because they didn't include the pings for Chad's phone in the preliminary hearing. So we don't know where Chad was for a lot of this. We know that he was there for some of it, but not everything. I think there's more to come in the final trial. But yeah, I do wonder if there is some truth to that. And JJ met his demise in that apartment. I just don't know. But yeah, we, hopefully we'll find out. But we also do, I was like really focused in on apartment 107, and, in digging through some of the papers, it did stand out to me. Oh no, I think maybe in one of Ian's interviews, because, I've like kind of distanced myself from the case a little, so I'm losing some of the specifics. But he mentioned, this was when Ian decided that he wasn't going to cooperate with the FBI anymore. There was something with a warrant. I think maybe they wanted him to do something, and it had to do with apartment 107. And then he read through it and was like, but I think in reality, he knew Alex was dead, and he was like, oh, okay, all right. Hey, the king is dead, the witch is dead. And so, but there was something about like, they had a warrant to go back into apartment. I keep saying 107. Hopefully it is 107. And test. I can't think of the word for it because I'm getting tired. But yeah, but at that point, I know that the apartment was already back on the market, so they would have deep cleaned it. So I don't know what came of that, but it was notable that they did some kind of forensics testing on apartment 107, specifically that apartment. So, again, I mean, when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, but I do wonder if like Chad actually gave us that detail as early as November of 2019. We'll find out. I mean, they have so many more pieces. We're picking up 52 pieces of a 500 piece puzzle, trying to figure out what it looks like. Did I ever meet Alex? And if so, how did you find him? He looks like a creepy perv to me. Yeah, to me too. I talked about this in one of my lives, or you talk about it different places, but like if it's an interview, you don't know what they're going to include. But no, I met different family members on several occasions, but I never met Alex. And also, like, I remember Lori talking about like some fight she was in with Summer, and because it's just a really gossipy family, so they get together. There was a little bit that was attractive to me just because like they were so close and they lived like so close to each other, so it was like so opposite my experience, and I think that also attracted Joe. But because initially he really liked Lori's dad, but I think he just liked being part of like this men's group where he was talking about how like he's made business contacts and this and that. But I do not remember Lori ever talking about Alex. I knew she had a brother, and I knew his name was Alex, but I don't remember. Like, I remember her talking about Melanie. I remember Adam was on the vacation with us in 2007, and I met, and hung out with her parents several times, I think. Definitely 2 times. I might have met them when I first met Lori on that trip. I'm not exactly sure, but I never met Alex, and yeah, so who knows? Maybe it might be because they already planned this murder for a long time, and Lori didn't want me like getting any information or what. I don't know what it was, but yeah. So when people talked about her being so close, I always questioned that, because I was just like, how do I know so much about, like, I never met Melanie Pawlowski, but I knew a lot about her from Lori talking about her. But I knew nothing about Alex, except I did know from somewhere that he did imitations. That's all I remember. It doesn't mean she never talked about him, but I have no recollection of it. And that did kind of stand out to me. It definitely made sense to me that he wasn't on that vacation that Adam was on, and even Kay was there. I did not remember ever meeting Kay. I was going through these photo albums, and I saw a picture of her. I was like, what? But yeah, so it was like a big family affair for like the Vallows and Coxes and stuff. And so it just almost reminds me of the story that's out there, that the rest of the Cox family was in Hawaii. Alex allegedly was alone with Stacy when she passed, and used her credit cards and stuff. I just don't know if it's like that kind of pattern, like, okay, the family has left, you do your creepy hitman thing. So I don't know. But yeah, he's so creepy. And yeah, I never thought that the kids were alive. And that really was more based on statistics. I remember watching a true crime episode where they talked about in instances where a caregiver didn't report a child missing, it was like, I remember it was single digit percent. Like it was a very small percentage of the time that the child is found alive. And here in this case, it had been months and all these like really weird things. And, so I was, and I, as soon as I saw the news and read the story, I didn't even make it all the way through. And I texted her. And when I was going through my text to see like if I missed anything, I actually saw, because the text went through green, and Lori always used an iPhone. And so when that text went through green, I was like, they're gone and she's in the wind. But I think yesterday saw that it was marked as red. And it certainly wasn't marked as red, because when I sent it, or anytime soon thereafter, because I kept checking to see if she replied. But I'm like, what kind of criminal, like you turn off your phone, but then you turn it back on and you have red receipts turned on? Like, yeah, it's pretty crazy. So yeah, it shows as red now. So yeah. Okay, I will take 2 more questions if there are 2 more questions, and then I'm gonna go to bed. My family is the most important thing to me. I guess I'm kind of just a ticking time bomb. True words. Yeah, ticking time bomb. Yeah, that I'm sure. And she will rue the day she said that, because I'm sure she never imagined that, that would be played as much as it has. But yeah, she really was. Yeah. But, I think also, Lori, I don't know how much of this was her upbringing or what, but like, it was like, this is where, she and Joe probably weren't a good match, because like Lori always had to look like they were the perfect family, that like she had the money, she had the beauty, she had the body, like she had everything, and I think she really loved being the belle of the ball wherever she went, and envied, by other people. And then Joe was a different kind of perfectionist. Like Lori, I always got the impression, even when I was favorable toward her, that she was very much about like how she appeared. Whereas Joe, it was like, no, he needed things to be perfect for him to feel validated. And he was also all about, like, he loved looking like a celebrity couple and stuff. But yeah, so I think trying to, when people try to maintain this impression of like, I have everything, my life is perfect, now I'm married, I have a boy, I have a girl, everything's great, like she had Colby calling Joe dad, and he was 7 and his dad was still alive, but it's just like, no, that just wouldn't have looked perfect enough, I think. It was like everything just had to look perfect, and that's a lot to try to maintain, but so I'm sure even if she hadn't become the homicidal maniac that she did, she was headed for some kind of breakdown. That it's just not sustainable. Annie, just know that all the bad in the past eventually became an asset later in life. Do not make me cry. I've held myself together more in this live than almost any of them. Any of the ones where I'm talking about emotional stuff, like my brother. But thank you. I do believe that. One, I don't have Lori's drive to try to like make things like look perfect. That's why I have been transparent about my relationship with my brother, and part of it is I hate that we do this to families. Like, they've already been victimized, and especially to victims. It's like, you have a victim who they've either been murdered or they died like a broken shell of the person they once were because of the operations of, an obsessed sociopath, psychopath, whatever, all the past, and then like I've never been in like Facebook groups for real crime, and I never would again after I get on the other side of this. I can't even watch true crime. There's a woman, Bailey. She does makeup and tells stories, and that's it. And like the like datelines and stuff around the case, just because I have to. I'm always on the quest for information, but but I do believe that in many ways it has been an asset. Like, there are some things where if you have a particularly difficult childhood, like there are triggers that you have to be aware of. Like holidays are hard. I really have to brace myself for them. But when it comes to anything that requires grit, and I don't mean this to be self-aggrandizing, like there have been times in the midst of this, I'm like, am I going to drive myself crazy? Are these compulsions going to drive me crazy? But they didn't. But yeah, so I think when it comes to anything like involving grit, is like, well, no, I have that in spades from my childhood, and I think also having grown up foster, and I don't say any of this for self-pity. I say this every time. It is the thing that I am most proud of, like overcoming that. And so even when people express pity, or like sympathy, I have to tell myself, like, they need to do this, like, so that I'm not like, no, like, because it's the one area that it's the hardest to receive, because in my mind, like, I look back at my past and I have no idea how I made it through all of that to have any kind of semblance of a normal life. But having grown up foster, I was thinking about this today, like, where you see other kids be defended, like even things that you might not think about, like a predatory teacher, or, any number of things that, like, most kids will be protected from, like, when you grow up foster, especially if it's not, I shouldn't say when you grow up foster, because we have a foster mother in here, and I think that there's a lot more light being shed on foster care. When I was in foster care, it was in the embryonic stages, and we had a visit once a year from a social worker in front of the foster parents, and they'd say, how's everything going? Like, what are you going to say? But so it has come a long way. But that said, for me, like, this is intensely personal, because I saw how much Joe had to advocate for himself as a kid, from the little bit that I saw of him, for the years that I can remember. He was and it's like that story I told on Dateline, that he wanted to pull our family together for Thanksgiving. It was the only time we ever had a Thanksgiving together, and then everyone started dying. So, we would never have that opportunity again. And so he was the one, like, he was always like fighting for himself and stuff. And that's what you have to do if you're going to survive, if you're in any kind of system, whether you're in foster care or just an abusive, biological home, like, at some point, people are either broken by it, or they find ways to, like, fight for themselves, And so I think, having watched Joe fight, even in small ways, like some of the weird things that would happen in visits with our mom and things like that, to see him summarily dismissed by law enforcement, especially when it's like, I can step outside myself and say, even if I weren't a biased family member, this doesn't make sense. This just doesn't make sense for a police department to be like, Miss Cushing, your brother died of a heart attack. And he also told me, if you're interested in the life insurance, that's a civil matter. And I was so angry. I was like, I'm not one of these money grubbers. I'm talking about it informing motive for, we didn't know where the kids were, but I said for Tylee going missing. But I did believe that she was dead. But, so for him to even, when I asked, are you at least going to look into the life insurance, and to bounce back with, if you're interested in the life insurance, and who knows, maybe he knew that I was on the policy. I don't know. But yeah, so to see Joe dismissed, for me, it triggers that, like, no, he was dismissed enough. Like, you're not going to, it should not just be the wealthy and the powerful who get the real investigations, And so even when, Phoenix police said that they were going to review the case, when they published their finding, supposedly, that he did indeed die of a heart attack, one, they had never contacted me. So they had no interest in chasing down, like, anything that I talked about with, the photo albums and, just all that I've put out there, even before tonight's live. Yeah. I mean, to just be told your brother died of a heart attack, as if, like, this man's word was the final word. And I felt like he was telling me, okay, so you just run along now. Like, you let the big boys take care of this, you know, like this does not concern you. So I think that in some ways, you know, the way I grew up probably, you know, probably fuels some of the determination. Like, you know, I'll just throw out on Twitter, I'll tag them and be like, I'm not going away, you know, like I'm not. There's not a period where I'm going to be like, okay, I guess I tried my best. Yes, yeah, absolutely. No one deserves to be dismissed. Very well said, Annie. Aw, Joe is lucky to have you as a sister. Well, thank you. Thank you. I wish, you know, I wish I could have been there more for him when he was alive. Yeah, but yeah, but this is what I have to give. We love you and support your efforts. Thank you. Oh, stop. Okay, you guys are just determined to make me cry. Thank you, U.S. Navy, Gray Ghost. These names, they crack me up. Yeah, Blondie, like how they disregard sex workers and addicts, like they are less than. All humans, victims have value. Exactly. I mean, that's one of the things. I do think it's more pronounced now that we have like Facebook groups. I think there's more positive coming out of like social media groups than there is negative by far. Like some of the people in these groups are seriously like genius level. But I have seen like some of the cruelest judgments, you know, like in terms of like, I can understand someone being mad at me because I called Melanie Gibb out, and, you know, like I'm not here to build a Christmas list. And I was angry at Melanie from the time she stepped forward, just because, you know, just the way she did that interview and just like casually announced, you know, I'm doing this for the victims who are no longer with us, and names them. And it's like, is that how I'm going to find out like that the kids are dead? Like, you know, and anyway, whatever. Yeah, but to see victims like, okay, fine, you want to take shots at me, I'll block you. I don't care, you know. I'll block you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, just because you know, at some point it's like, no, I can't have thousands of people have access at me and just, you know, hitting me with the same stuff over and over. But the victims, they're not here to defend themselves. And, you know, I mean, it's one thing to like, okay, you want to pick over the perpetrators, but and even if you have like, you know, actual evidence of something, like, I'm not saying like bury the truth. I mean, even when I was doing this live, I had to think through, like, do I want to address the fact that they could have potentially used Tylee as a lure, you know, to get access to Joe? It is a possibility, you know. So I'm willing to look at, you know, potentially really hard possibilities. But the way that people like make these victims run the gauntlet, and if they make it to the end, then they will decide if they're going to extend empathy or not. I'm just like, what, you know, that to me, it just, yeah, that just cuts against the grain. I'm just treating people with dignity, you know. So it should not matter. I know, you know, it sounds like a Pollyanna. It should not matter if someone is a sex worker or if they're, you know, if they're addicted to drugs. If they're murdered, they were murdered and they should be investigated. Okay. I mean, even Alex dying, like, you know, people saying like, who cares that Alex died? Well, I care, not because I care at all about Alex, but if there had been 3 people, you know, according to the shows that I've watched, when you have, the more people you have who have the secrets, the higher the chances are that something, one person is going to give. Two, it's a little easier to keep the secrets. The ideal is one, you don't trust anyone with the secrets, and then there's no one who can be offered a deal and check you under the bus. And but if Alex had been here, so if Gilbert had taken him in when he was a suspect with Brandon's the shooting, if Chandler had taken him in when he shot Alex, I mean, even Chandler, the one guy, I forget his name, was like, we were hoping to interview Alex again. I was like, you were hoping? I mean, he was just sitting in Rexburg, did he not respond to your RSVP? Like, what do you mean you were hoping? He even came to Phoenix. He got married. That's a paper trail, it's not like these people were good at hiding, and so, if Gilbert had stepped up and, at least investigate, I don't know what happened there. I mean, when it comes to Gilbert, Chandler, and Phoenix police, it just seems like a three-ring circus. And, I just question if they're just doubling down on trying to avoid the scrutiny rather than who knows, behind the scenes, they might be participating, cooperating, but Phoenix police's little thing of making their announcement that they were upholding Joe's cause of death, but they just happened to put that out there hours after Biden was inaugurated. I mean, I used to be a reporter. I mean, it might have been a coincidence, but it's also a trick to bury a story, and or when the kids were found, Chandler Police Department was like, hey, we reopened the investigation into Charles Vallow's death because they saw an angry army, headed their way. And according to Justin Lum, they said, it could take as long as 6 months. Well, that was 10 months ago, so they dodged that bullet, but then, the masses moved on. So, yeah, whatever. Okay. All right. Okay. This is the last thing I'll address. What? Wait a minute. I just read the medical examiner who did your brother's autopsy was the same doc who did the autopsy of Travis Alexander and the Jodi Arias murder. I didn't know that. Okay. All right. Now I will just going to take a screenshot of this. Chase that squirrel up a tree. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, didn't know that. Okay. Someone, you should do lives more often. Yeah. So this was me taking a break. I kind of suck at taking breaks. But, when I read that article, I was just like, strike while the iron's hot. And it just worked out, that Garna, I really didn't think she would be able to authorize me to share the pictures. Yeah. So, but in the future, I'm not saying I won't do any more lives, but I will feel a lot more comfortable doing these in the safety of a private Facebook group. Because, like I said in the beginning of the live, if you were there for it, it's a lot of effort to, be continually, looking for trolls and stuff because, I'm using my professional YouTube channel, which, it was a calculated risk. I knew that. Yeah. So I'll definitely feel more comfortable there, because, cowards hide behind, fake profiles. So, if it's a verified profile and people have to stand by their comments, they tend to be not quite as unreasonable. But anyway, okay, guys. Well, I am going to have to turn in. It was wonderful getting to hanging out with you. I don't take it lightly that you guys chose to spend your Friday night, helping me advocate for Joe. So thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And the live, it takes a little while to process, but if you missed part of it, it should be up in the morning. So, okay, bye guys.